All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the stream. I hope everybody is doing well tonight. We are doing a extra stream tonight. So we're going to pick up where we left off last night. So, before we get into the actual stream itself, I just want to take a quick second to thank the supporters of the channel, beginning with our partners. They are listed here on the screen. They are the highest tier of subscription over on YouTube memberships and Patreon. They are Gabi Bashir and Gerboles Inc. I would also like to thank all the other supporters listed here. They are the other tiers of subscription over on YouTube memberships and Patreon, as well as Twitch subscriptions. So thank you very much for your support. It is greatly appreciated. And I hope it goes without saying that I appreciate each and every one of you viewers here. Whether you're on the Twitch side or the YouTube side, we do simulcast to both sides. So I really appreciate you guys being here, following along with the project, interacting with me, and so forth. Thank you guys for being here. That being said, this is an interactive stream, so I do like to interact with you guys in chat. I see there's some comments over there on the YouTube side already. So I do keep an eye on both sides, and I will, I'm happy to chat with you guys if you ever have questions or things you want to talk about, as long as it's somewhat related to what we're talking about on the stream. It's all good, right? So, let's see. Over on the YouTube side, looks like we have a few different comments. Well, hello. How are you? Zuzagi, good to see you. Let's see. I had a question. Do you think it's a good idea to learn OpenGL/Vulkan if you're trying to be a game programmer? Will it assist me if I'm going to use Unreal to make games, or should I better spend that time learning Unreal? So, I think I already know the answer to this, but it really depends on what you want to do, right? If you want to be a gameplay programmer, then it couldn't hurt to understand how those things work under the hood, but your time might be better spent in the short term learning the engine that you want to use, right? If Unreal is what you want to use to make games, you probably should focus on learning that. That being said, once you get comfortable with that, don't be afraid to dig a little bit deeper and try to understand some of the things that are happening behind the curtains on Unreal or Unity or Godot, whatever engine it is you choose, right? So it really depends on what you want to do. If you're going to be a gameplay programmer where you're going to focus on mechanics and things like that, not so much the graphics side of things or the inner systems, I would say focus on that first. But if you're looking to really understand what's under the hood and the technology and how it works, then yeah, you should probably look into those things, right? Yeah, no, don't worry about, you're not interrupting at all. Like I said, this is an interactive stream, right? And the whole point of this stream is to be an educational exercise, right? So wherever I can help clarify something for you, I'm more than happy to. So don't take it as interrupting. You're certainly not, right? Okay, Apotham, good to see you. Welcome. And Ruche with the Yar Bongos. I always appreciate that. All right, so given the title of the stream, last night we actually kind of started diving into making some of the debug console enhancements, and we kind of decided to accidentally create a small scripting language, I guess. So we're actually kind of accidentally creating one. And so the idea behind this is we're going to keep things really light, right? I don't want this to sort of evolve into a full-blown scripting language because I don't want that to be something that's is in the core engine, right? That's really something that should be external. But we do want something to allow us to manipulate some stuff within the debug console, and that's sort of the point of this, right? So that's what we're going to do. We're basically going to create two different parsers, one to parse expressions and one to parse function calls. And we're going to keep it at that, keep it pretty simple, right? Let's see. Can I follow along this playlist on a Mac M1 Silicon? Yes. So actually, the Mac support for this engine was developed on an M1 Mac, right? I actually don't have an Intel-based one, so it does run on that. That being said, Mac support wasn't actually introduced in the series until like episode 75 or 76, something like that. So there are going to be sections of it that are going to be incomplete at the beginning, that only cover Linux and Windows. You'll probably want to follow closer to the Linux side of things because that's more similar to what's going on Mac. But it's not going to work, unfortunately, from the very beginning of the series, because at the very beginning of the series, I didn't have a Mac to use, right? So around episode 75 is where that picks up, and we just kind of drop the platform layer existing in from there. And then everything we did after that point, we kind of hit all the platforms if we have to hit them at all, right? The platform code ideally is something we don't touch very often. And so far, we haven't really had to go back to it a whole heck of a lot. So it's already all kind of in place. So just bear that in mind if you're going to follow along with the series. If you have like a Windows machine, I would maybe start the series on that. And then when you get the to the Mac portion, follow it that way, right? Once you get, I think it's episode 76 is where we introduced that, if I remember. Okay, so when we were talking about this last night, where we left off, basically we sort of want to have this type of syntax here. Or actually, I guess this is probably a better example, right? Where we have some function that we call, and then between parentheses, there are arguments for that separated by commas. And in between those commas, we can have expressions, right? So an expression can be, maybe we add two variables together, maybe we just pass a single variable or a single value, right? That's defined in here. And we should be able to resolve that thing and pass the result of that expression into the function is kind of the way that we're going to work this. So that's the idea. But before we get to the command processing, we actually have to do the expression processing first. And that's basically just entering into the console some sort of variable name, an equal sign, and then some sort of value, right? And that's more or less what we're going to do. This comes after we have the console object register, which an object can be thought of as a variable. And I call it a console object because it has various types that we can use, right? The types are int32, unsigned int32, a float, just a regular float, 32-bit float, and a struct. And the struct can then have more objects within itself, right? So it could be recursive in that way. And so we would register the object that's backed by some actual object somewhere in the engine. For example, a mesh, right? And then we can register properties of that object along with it, which are also backed by real variables that exist somewhere. And the advantage to doing it this way is that we just maintain a pointer to those things, and all this system has to do is just reach out and basically set data to some memory block, right? So we added this functionality last night. We haven't actually tested it yet because we don't have the ability to go into the console to test anything yet. So the other thing that I was thinking about last night after we ended the stream is technically an expression could also just be this. We could also have the thing, right, by itself. And this, just entering a object name on its own, would print the value of said object to the console, right? So that's just kind of another little bonus thing that we'll have there so that we don't have to like set up some weird getter for it, right? We could just kind of toss the variable name into the console and then hit enter, and it'll actually output the value. So this is probably going to be the first thing that we do, right? So we're going to create our expression processor, and the first thing that we're going to have that do is just handle if we enter a variable name by itself or an object name by itself, and print that out. And that'll be our first test, and then we'll move on to this. And then once we get this working with a variety of different operators and things like that, we'll move on to actually handling the commands. Okay, let me see. I have a question. Did you use geometry or tessellation shader for the terrain reduce? No. So what we did on that, and actually tessellation is a separate to-do item, but what we did was we basically generated a single vertex buffer, and then we generated, or I just shouldn't say a buffer, right? A single set of vertices. And then we generated several sets of vertices depending on how many LODs we had based on the chunk size. And what those LODs do is they basically skip a certain amount of vertices in that chunk of geometry, effectively cutting the amount of what's rendered in half. So we only have one set of vertex data, and then we just have a few sets of index data that skips geometry along the way. And we don't have to actually upload multiple sets of geometry or do any fancy shader stuff whatsoever. All we're doing is just skipping vertices, right? Let's see. You're doing awesome work. I remember a series called Handmade Hero. That's still around, actually. Yours is much simpler, but what the former did was create a game from scratch. You're building an engine. Yeah. So that's more or less... I mean, we're going to build games using this engine, but, as a litmus test. But, yeah, that's more or less what we're doing here is we're building it from scratch, right? And this is, pretty heavily influenced by, at least in the beginning, by what Casey was doing over on that side, right? So credit where it's due. That's clever. Yeah. So that was the quickest way I could think to do it, right? In terms of LODs on the geometry there. So that's kind of what I rolled with. Let's see. Barrow1985, thank you for the follow. Appreciate that. Welcome. Trash Can, good to see you. Welcome to the stream. All right. So the thing I'm going to do is we're actually going to have... I might actually wind up splitting this out into sort of a separate file for this if it gets too crazy. But I think for right now, I'm just going to keep it as sort of a static function within this console file. And we're just going to declare it here and roll with it, right? It's going pretty good. Not bad. I can't complain. I felt like doing an extra stream tonight just because this whole thing had me intrigued last night, right? So... Self-Made Ice, thank you for the follow. Appreciate that. Welcome. Let's see. Oh, is that a... Yes, thank you for the super chat. I appreciate that. I think that's actually the first one I've gotten from the YouTube side, or maybe the second one. I appreciate the super chat over there. Thank you for that. All right, so what we're going to do is... let's see. We need to think about the inputs versus the outputs, right? So, let's have a Boolean return to indicate success or failure on the parsing operation as a whole. And then we'll do console, and we'll call this expression parse. And we're going to take in, a string, which is going to be the expression. That's the expression that we're going to have to tokenize and whatnot. And then we'll do the, let's see, console object type. We're going to do a pointer to that. So we're going to say out type. And that's basically going to tell us what the resulting value is, or what its type is. And then, let's see, we could do, for our output value, we're going to need to know how much memory needs to be reserved. Because I could just do a void pointer, right? But we wouldn't have necessarily allocated the right amount of memory for that. Although, theoretically, the most amount of memory that we would ever have to write to is technically 8 bytes when I'm thinking about it, right? Because our supported types are int32, which is 4, uint32, which is 4, f32, which is 4, and then a struct, which could be a void pointer, right? A pointer is 8 bytes. So I'm thinking the maximum that we would ever have to allocate here is 8 bytes. So maybe whenever we call this internally, we just allocate 8 bytes of memory. Maybe we only use 4 of it, whatever. And we just do a copy to that memory. So I think that's what I'm going to do. We're going to say out value. The other option would be to have essentially 4 output values, right? One for int 32, one for unsigned int 32, one for float, and one for a struct, which could be just a void pointer. But the problem with that is if we add more types, then we have to add more output values, and I'm not a fan of that. So I think that is more or less what we're going to do. Now, in terms of the expression parse, I think what we should probably do is first off make sure that there is an expression. Oops. Expression, right? Or if not expression, rather. So if we don't have an expression, and I'm actually not gonna, you know what? We'll guard against that happening because this is going to be internal. We're going to guard against that happening, actually. I'm not going to allow this to even be past that. Because this is only going to be static, so we're not going to allow the command line execute to actually pass empty strings here, right, or nulls. So I'm also not going to allow it to pass, null pointers to either of these things either, right? Because all of this logic is going to be internal. I can control it, so I'm not going to worry about error checking here because that will kind of actually slow us down a little bit. Let's see. You're hating on C++'s constructor because they're weird. Which constructor? C++ has a few. Right, there's the copy constructor, the move constructor, the default constructor. Or all of them. Let's see. Okay. Is every line of code for this engine written in these videos? Or there's some done off camera? If yes, do you cover that in subsequent videos? So, early on, yes, every line of code is covered in the videos. So the series actually started off as a tutorial series. So very early on, we actually did cover the entire thing that way. And in fact, let me pull up something really quickly. So I'm going to drop this in chat as well, a link to it. But we have this website, kohiengine.com, that has a link to the series, the YouTube channel, all that stuff, and everything that we have here. Also links to the GitHub and all that stuff. So early on, this actually started off as a YouTube tutorial series, and I actually put links to the commits in the video description. I stopped doing that after a while because it got, once the project started to grow in size, it became a little bit difficult to manage that. So past a certain point, we kind of left the tutorial format because that only really fits when you're really starting the project. But once it grows beyond a certain size, it's not really, tutorial isn't really a good format for that, right? It's, so the format of it changed a few times. We tried a few different things and ultimately landed on this live stream format. Now, nowadays, there are sections of code that we do handle offline sometimes because there's no value in writing it live, right? But whenever I do that, we do actually check and go through the diff and code and review that, right? I don't necessarily go line by line anymore, just because it's things that we've covered previously in the series that I don't have to necessarily go line by line at this point in the series. But yeah, that's more or less the description of it, right? Crumbling Soul, good evening. I hope you're doing well. Are we working on native scripting? So it's kind of a lightweight scripting language, if you even want to call it that. It's going to be super, super basic. Basically, this is for our little debug console that we get when we hit the tilde key. And it's going to allow us to enter some basic commands, manipulate objects in the scene, like position and rotation, things like that, through the console. And we'll obviously add commands to it as we go, but it's not going to be designed to be a full-fledged scripting language. And the reason for that is because I don't want all of the overhead of that in the core of the engine, right? So this is going to be a very basic version of it. It's going to be very small, very concise. And then when we do get ready to do a full-blown scripting language, that is going to be a plugin to the engine that we add. And the reason we're doing it that way is because not all applications need it. Not all games need it. And so we shouldn't include it by default, right? So that's kind of the idea there. Hi, consider using double to cover all numeric types. It will make the code simpler, and it will cover dynamic range, I32, U32, and F32 without any precision lost. True, but the problem is the reason we're using floats and not doubles is because we have to upload all that data to the GPU, and uploads are slow. And so if you've got lots of vertex data that are all doubles, you're literally passing twice the amount of data to the GPU. And there's just no need for it, right? There's ways to handle that without literally doubling your data size, right? So there's lots of places where that does make sense, but in graphics programming, generally speaking, unless you're doing something that absolutely requires it, which is few and far between, it generally doesn't pay to use those larger data types, right? Most graphics cards are actually optimized to work with floats instead. Too much padding. Yeah, exactly. It's just, it tends to be sort of overkill there. Let's see. Are you going to use reflection or load everything as a DLL? In terms of what? Like right now, all of our plugins are using, are just DLLs, right? And we just load, we essentially have a standard set of function names that it looks for in the DLL, and those are the hooks into the DLL. And then the engine just kind of initializes that and lets the DLL do whatever it needs to do. We'll probably be simplifying that as time goes on too. Because like a renderer plugin is much different than an audio plugin, for example. The entry points are different, the data passed back and forth is different, things like that. Okay. So, the first thing that I'm thinking we probably ought to do on the expression before anything else is a string trim, right? And this actually is done in place on the provided string, which actually makes me think the first thing that we should do is take a copy of the string, right? So we don't modify the initial string, because we don't know where that came from. It could have come from a split array, or it could have come from something else. So let's go ahead and actually, let's just make that a character. And we'll say expression copy, right? And then we'll say string duplicate expression. Paladini, thank you for the follow. And Alan, WGT, thank you for the follow as well. Also, let's see. See Insta follow. I appreciate that. Master Snoods, it's good to see you, by the way. I meant to say that a minute ago. Glad to have you here. Rare specimen among all other React devs. Yeah, I prefer to work in C, right? If I have to work in something else, I'll do it, especially for work or whatnot. But yeah, C is my go-to. All right, so we'll take a copy of the string, which means when we are done cleaning up, or when we're done parsing the expression, we should probably free that string. So expression copy, we'll just do that down here, just so that we don't leak that memory, right? And then we'll do a string trim on expression copy. And you know what? Actually, this is done. Let's see. Performs an in-place pointer to the trim string. Okay. So why don't we do I should probably get the length of this at first, actually, because that's going to move. Essentially what this does is move the pointer inwards from the left and puts a 0 terminator on the right? So I probably ought to change that a little bit. Magettes, hello, welcome. Good to see you. Excarnate Sojourner, I think I got that right. Welcome, and thank you for the follow. I appreciate that. Kind of unrelated, but no matter how many times I've tried using NeoVim, I just could not get started. Everything just feels too complicated beyond Vim, and stuff starts not working. Yeah, so basically how I got around that is I got my configuration set up, and then I don't update it. And then I never have a problem, right? Because if it ain't broke, why fix it? So I just don't update NeoVim, right? I think I'm still on an old version of it. I haven't updated it in forever. You can't get a config started? Well, I'll tell you what. I will... Oh, Master Snoods, thank you for gifting a tier 1 sub to Paladini. I appreciate that. So what I'll do is I'll actually drop a link here. I'll do this over on the YouTube side as well. I wrote an article with my NeoVim setup. So if you're interested in that, that is at that link there. And it has a link also to a GitHub that actually contains the setup as well. So it kind of explains what I use, why I use it, and how it's set up. So hopefully that helps. Let's see. Yeah, GPUs suck at operating on doubles. Exactly. Yeah, floats are the way to go. You were thinking about using doubles in the engine for the scripting language. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be needed. We can add support for it. You know, basically just be adding another type here, right? And that would fit right in with our memory that we're going to allocate for our console, or our out value anyways, right? Because it'll still be 8 bytes. Let's see. GPU only supports 32-bit math plus like float and int. You may also want to cut precision by using integer. Integer is used as an iterator, so I see no reason to always use double. Yeah, I haven't found a reason to use doubles really. Not in game dev anyway. So what exactly do you work on as your full-time job? Funny you should ask that. I just recently got laid off for my full-time job, so nothing right now, technically. But before that happened, I was basically working on a web-based application that was like a 3D room planner, right? And that was using WebGL under the hood, and so it was still graphics programming, right? It was just web-based, different set of technology, but more or less that's what I was doing, right? But yeah, I found out Wednesday I was getting laid off, so fun. Let's see. In my own scripting language called Polka, I'm also using doubles together with NAN boxing to pack pointers into the NAN mantissa. Since on x86 64, the usable pointers are only 48-bit or something. That's a good point, actually. I hadn't thought that far into it, to be completely honest. Will you be open at some point to make a breakdown video of the engine architecture? Would be valuable. So I did that in the very beginning of the series, actually. I should probably do like an updated version of that. I haven't yet, but yeah, we should probably go over that on stream at some point. You're the second person that's asked about that now, so now that there's a little demand, I might actually get on that at some point. Let's see. I've tried NV Chad, Lazy Vim, Primogens, VimRC, messed up every single one. Yeah, I mean, yeah, the whole thing about Vim or NeoVim, whichever one you're using, right, is you never really want to just use, you know, VimRCs or whatever blindly, right? You really want to understand what you're putting in there and why you're putting it in. And so even if I am using one as like a reference, I still type it out all myself so that I know exactly what's going into it. And I tend to go, especially with the settings, I'll go line by line and just set something and try it and then do the next line, set something and try it and see if I like it, right? And it's time consuming that way, but it's kind of how I landed on what I have. Right, someone might have different package managers, or someone might not use one at all. Exactly, yeah. It's not one size fits all. We have ads. So for those of you who are new to the channel, I like to pause the stream whenever we get ads. I know on the YouTube side, ads aren't quite the same over on that side, but on Twitch, we are served ads once every 30 minutes for 90 seconds. So I just like to pause the whole stream so that nobody misses anything during that stretch of time, because it's like a full screen ad. You can't see what's going on in the stream and you can't hear it. And so we don't want people to miss content. So that's why I do that. Let's see. And I'll answer the YouTube comments when we come back from ads. So we've got about 45 seconds left, and then we'll go ahead and circle back to that. And I see there's some stuff on the Twitch side too. It's also a good opportunity for me to hydrate. All right. We got about a little over 20 seconds left. Ads, so we'll just wait for those to clear out, and then we'll move on. Almost there. All right, cool. Ads are dead, and we are back. NAND boxing is fun because one can pack a short ASCII string directly into a double, saving some indirection. That's true. Yeah, it would be nice for someone who wants to watch the series without feeling lost. Yeah, so I do go over my planned architecture in the very beginning. And of course, I'm never really able to stick to that 100%, right? Because things develop as you go on. But the series actually does go into some architecture, right? So we do touch on that in the beginning. It's been a while since we've retouched on it, so there's definitely going to be some value there, and that's definitely something I will make. So thank you for bringing that up again, because that just lets me know that people actually want to see that, right? So thanks for doing that. I assume that's for the ads. Yeah, I just don't want people to miss content while ads are up, right? At the end of the day, productivity is key. Do what works for you. Exactly. Yeah, if you want to use VS Code, if that's more valuable to you, then do it. When you change directions, do you note why you change directions through the design of this at all? Yes. So actually, we had before we implemented our render graph system, we actually had a completely different view system that I was trying, because it was based on my interpretation of a talk from GDC years ago. And it was something I always wanted to try implementing, and we tried it, and it didn't work. And we're like, these are the reasons it didn't work, and then we ripped it out and replaced it with the render graph, right? So yeah, we definitely do discuss that stuff, because part of the process here is that we try things to see what works and what doesn't work, right? We experiment a little bit. So this isn't, at this point, like a rigid tutorial series where we're just like, we have everything's programmed in advance. We have a very strict regiment that we stick to. We try things, we experiment, we see what works, what doesn't work, and then we analyze why it works or doesn't work. If we go to make a change, we analyze that too. So yeah, we do definitely do that. Let's see. Kickstart NVim is a good single file config to get started. I've heard good things about that one. I haven't used it though. Let's see. Somebody dropped a link. I don't know what that was to. But yeah, generally speaking, links aren't allowed in chat. So if you want to drop a link, feel free to ask, and I'll see if I can grant it to you for like a minute or something. But yeah, generally speaking, they're kind of banned, right? So here's the thing: I have really low expectations for my IDE, autocomplete, a terminal, formatting shortcut like the VS Code format thing, which works on different file types. Yep. If I have those three, I'm running on 100% efficiency. Yeah. So For me, it's that, but also fuzzy finding is another thing, right? I have to have the ability to search for files with a fuzzy finder, right? And Telescope is really good for that. But yeah, I get it. 666 lines. This file? No. Yeah, we did have a file, I forget which one, that was 666 lines at one point. It was pretty funny. All right, so if we trim the string, but we should probably also save off the length of the string. Let's see, though. We move... The more I think about this, the more I don't like the in-place trim, actually. Because technically speaking, we don't know how far we moved from the original pointer, right? So I suppose I could store a copy of that pointer and then destroy that instead. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure I'm sold on that, actually. We might wind up having to change out how our trim works. But for now, I guess that's what I'll do. So I'll say character, expression, copy, original equals expression copy. Oops, copy. And then we'll string trim the copy. And then we'll free original. So basically what will happen is these two will be the same address to begin with, and then the string trim will move the pointer forward if it has to trim on the left for expression copy, and then that's why we free expression copy original, and that should get us around that problem. All right, so the next thing we need to think about is, let me actually move some of my comments up here. Right. So that's sort of the spec, more or less. So the first thing that we want to do is actually just take that value and see if it's by itself without any sort of operator in there, right? So our operator that we're going to support, I guess, we're going to support equals, probably double equals, right? Because we can check to see, ooh, we don't have Boolean support in our console object types. We probably should. That's one I missed. Bool. Yeah, that would have been bad. So we can check for equality, right? So I guess let's write this out in comments first. Operators supported are equals, double equals, not equal, division, multiplication, addition, subtraction. Which can get a little bit weird with this as well, because this necessarily isn't always an operator. It might also be part of a value, right, if we're dealing with negative numbers. So that one might get a little bit weird. But these are the operators we're going to support, at least for right now. All right, so we have assignment, some equality checks, and then some basic math operators. Maybe we should support mod too. Let's see. you specifically don't want anything further than what I need. Yeah, I get that. What other languages do I work on? So a variety of stuff. I've worked on a variety of stuff over the years. At my most recent place, it was a combination of TypeScript and JavaScript, and then also some occasional C# on the back end. The job before that was all of those things plus SQL plus, your typical bash scripting and setting up, CI/CD kind of stuff, that kind of thing. Before that, I did C and C++ in addition on the back end, as well as C#, and then TypeScript, JavaScript on the front end. Before that, it was all those same things as well, but also Visual Basic was thrown in there, and then COBOL at one point. And also VBA at one point. Yeah, I think that's more or less it. Yeah, so it's kind of all over the place, right? I literally had a task for a previous job where I had to learn COBOL to actually build an interface to a system that was built in the 70s, right? So yeah, that was interesting. Let's see, Vim has those things. You can ignore the rest except the modal editing, which you don't want probably is a deal breaker. If you don't want, is probably a deal breaker. That's true. I don't know. I love modal editing. Have I watched the parser talk between John Blow and Casey Muratori? I think so. I don't know if I watched the whole thing, though, but I do recall that they had that talk. I don't remember the specifics of it, though, because it was a while ago. Have I ever tried Rust? Briefly, yes. Put it this way. If I'm using a language like that, I don't want the compiler telling me how to use my memory or how to format my code. Like, go away. Bat it away. I don't like it. Granted, I didn't use it for all that long, but yeah, I don't like being told how to use my memory, right? Which is why I don't use garbage collected languages either, for my personal stuff. What, were you a mainframe developer? No, I'm not that old. No, I just had to do, like I said, I had to pick up COBOL just because I had to interface with a system that was written in the 70s. It was uploaded on YouTube, mispressed return. Yeah, I get that. I do that all the time. Let's see. What do you do aside from working on the game engine? So, do you mean like just like hobby type stuff or professionally? Because I think I just covered everything professionally, pretty much. Okay. So I'm not going to worry about operators just yet. What I'm going to do is we're going to say operator found equals false, right? And we're hard coding that for now because we're actually going to do a little bit of parsing to see if we have an operator and determine what order those things should be parsed in and all that kind of stuff. But for right now, we're just going to say no operators. All we want to do is just echo the value of an object that's been created. So what we want to do is we've already trimmed that. So essentially what this would mean is if we don't have an operator, we should just have an identifier. Let's see. So if we have a string, how do I want to do this? So if we don't have a operator, and we don't have, or we do have a string index of string, or actually we don't even need that. It should just be index of. Expression copy. And we'll say a space, right? So if that is not equal to -1, then that means we have space in there somewhere that shouldn't really exist, right? Because all we're looking for is if there's no operator, we're looking for a single identifier, right? So in this case, I suppose we could save off the index, right? So we can report on that. Do I want to do that in a separate... Yeah, I should probably do that under here. So U32 space index equals that. Right, and then we'll do a separate check here to say if space index, which... Why did it give me a double if? And this should be an I32. If space index is not equal to -1, which I need to get rid of this. Right, if we have that not equal to -1, then we throw an error. And we say unexpected token at index, or I guess position, and then space index, right? And in this case, we'll return false. And really, we should probably do this cleanup no matter what. So I'm actually going to do a console expression parse cleanup. I'm going to do a label there. And we'll go also to the top here. B8 result equals true. And we'll do result equals false. Go to console expression parse cleanup. That way we get the cleanup no matter what our result is, and we can do a return result. Right? So that's just a really simple, quick and dirty check. Obviously, we're going to have something much more robust than that once we work this out, right? But we're just trying to do one thing at a time here. Blind Cat Studios with a raid of 8 viewers. Thank you very much for the raid. How are you doing tonight? What are you working on tonight? How was your stream? Welcome, raiders. So let me just give a shout out there to Blind Cat Studios. I appreciate that. Welcome, welcome. It's going to take me a second here just to catch up with all of the comments in chat. But for you raiders and folks that are new here, let me go ahead and give a quick introduction to what we're doing here. So we are working on something called the Kohi Game Engine. And I'll drop a link there in chat so that you guys have access to that. Our main website is kohiengine.com. So this is a game engine that is written from scratch in C, using Vulkan as its initial rendering backend. I say Vulkan as its initial rendering backend because we do have plans to support Direct3D, Metal for Mac OS, and then maybe even OpenGL at some point. We are cross-platform compatible. So this runs on Windows, Linux, and Mac OS desktop environments. Eventually, we do have plans for iOS and Android support as well down the road. It is a free and open source engine. So it is Apache 2.0 license, which basically means that if you use this engine or the code from this engine, all I ask is that you say that you used it, and that's literally it. There will never be any sort of licensing fees of any kind. There will never be any royalty fees of any kind. This is always going to be 100% free. All of the content here on Twitch, on YouTube, is always going to be 100% free. None of it is paywalled ever. I do have memberships there, but that is literally just a optional way to support me if you like my work. I don't paywall any of it, right? This is all supposed to be educational content, and I believe that stuff should be free. So all of it is free, right? So yes, that is more or less what we're working on here. At the moment, we are actually adding console command support, which kind of is accidentally turning into a bit of a scripting language. And we literally just got it started on writing the parser for that and thinking about what we need to support. And, just kind of taking one chunk of the problem at a time. And that's kind of where we are, right? Hydrate, thank you for that. Okay, so let me take a second and catch up on the chat. We are simulcasting, by the way, both on Twitch and YouTube. So there is that as well. So on the Twitch side, let me just expand this a little bit so I can read all the messages. I'm curious, what do you think of UE5 collecting a royalty after a game makes $1 million? I think that's their prerogative, right? And if you agree to that when you use the engine, I think that's fine, right? And I also think if you made $1 million off of it, I don't have a problem with them taking a cut, right? I think that's fine, right? They're upfront about it. They're honest about it. It's in the agreement. They don't try to hide it. And I think that's okay, right? And you have to remember that Unreal also comes from a time when Unreal Engine licenses used to be like $750,000 a seat, right? For like Unreal 3. So yeah, that's more or less what we're dealing with there, right? So I don't really have a problem with that. That's an impressive beard, Gandalf making the game engine. Sorry, I couldn't stop. Yesterday, what was it somebody said yesterday? It was the second coming of Odin is what I got yesterday, and now I'm getting Gandalf. That's hilarious. But I'm not Gandalf the Grey yet. I have some grays, but it's not all gray yet. I agree with you. I've used UE5. I like it. Yeah, I think it's fair, right? I think it's totally fair. Let's see. What you're feeling is Jixtra's judging eyes from the heavens. That looks like it was a response to something. I don't know why, but I always feel like I did something wrong if I use a go-to. Okay, so that is a common misconception, right? And that's one that irks me a little bit. Like, you shouldn't abuse it just like anything else, but it's a feature of the language, right? And this is a perfect example of when you'd want to use one, right? If you've got something that's been allocated in a routine like this, where you have a failure case at some point like this, but you still need cleanup to be done, why would you have the cleanup code here and also have the cleanup code here when you can literally just flip a flag, jump to it, which is what that comes out to when you compile it down, and you jump to it down here, and you always do the same thing when you're done. And if the program naturally flows down this way, you still get that same result. Why would you not use that, right? So yeah, a lot of people are like, oh, go-to is evil. No, it really isn't. It's just, if you abuse it, then obviously, yeah, that's not great, right? But it should just be properly used like any other feature of the language, right? Let's see. It was good gray boxing out a level. Nice. Okay, so that so you were working in what engine were you working in to box out your level? Let's see. A sane implementation of change string would try to write to read-only memory and invoke undefined behavior, which is why the compiler is probably like, just compiles this to puts A. Let's see. That's a response to some code, and yeah, I'm not going to read all that. But basically, you guys are talking about Rust and the borrow checker. Yeah. That's one of the things I don't like about Rust, right? I don't like it getting in the way of things like that. Like, I know what I'm doing with my memory. Let me do it. More or less. All right. So Are you developing any games, or are you just working on creating an engine? So we're going to do both, right? So we're not far enough along yet to actually make a game with this, but we're actually getting pretty close. What I'm writing here is just some convenience debugging tools, which are kind of important for when we actually get ready to make a game. But what we're going to do with this is, as we progress with the engine, we're going to stop at certain points, and we're going to say, let's make a game with this. Let's test all the features that we have in the game engine so far and see how this works, and make changes to the architecture or changes to features, whatever we need to do to make that thing work better. And we're almost to that point where we're going to actually stop engine development and start building a game, right? And we're going to start off with a simple game, and we're actually going to take that all the way through to release, right? And we'll release a game with it, and then we will, once we've done that, we'll move on to going back to the engine, developing more on it, adding more features. We'll do that for a while, and then we'll release another game, right? So that's kind of the idea here, is that we're going to release games with this as a litmus test to test the engine that we're building, right? Let's see. Wouldn't just using a break be the same as a goto in this case? So in the code I have here, yes, but the problem is we are going to have a lot more processing down here, right? We haven't filled this stuff in yet as to what we're going to do with all this. So we're going to have, essentially what we're doing here is we're saying if we don't have an operator, which we haven't written that logic, right? But we're going to detect any operators that are within the expression, and split this up and tokenize it and all that stuff. But we're going to say basically if at this point the only thing that's been identified or entered is an identifier, right? Then we're going to get the name of that identifier, and look into our console object system and say, hey, what do we have that's named this? And then we're going to print the value of whatever that thing is to the debug console. So that's sort of the first step, right? So we have more code that we have to write. What kind of game do you want to make? So I haven't announced the first game yet, but it is going to be an arcade-like style, right? I'm still actually developing the idea behind it. I know most of what I want to make. There's still a few details I'm working out. But yeah, we'll just go with it's going to be an arcade-style game. It's going to be relatively simple for our first game, right? And then we'll obviously make more complex things as we move forward. Yeah, so I mean, like, yeah, this isn't a loop, so like we could just set this result, right, and just fall through, essentially, breaking out of this, and fall through to this, and it'll do the same thing. But we're going to have more logic here. So the idea of the jump is we want to skip the lookup that we're about to do, and just go straight to this. That's the idea. So this is actually a very common pattern. And lower level code. It's just people see gotos and they freak out, right? But gotos have their place just like anything else. All right. So what we're going to do is at this point, if we are successful in our lookup, right, we are then going to take a look at all of the registered objects and see which one is actually called what we've entered in the console. So what we're going to do is we'll do a U32 registered object length. And we're going to set that equal to darray length. State pointer registered objects, right? And so that'll give us the count. And then, for U32 I equals 0, I is less than registered object length plus I. And then we'll do a if. Do we want to do case insensitive here? I'm thinking we do. This is just the debug console, right? It doesn't have to be super specific. I think we're going to allow this to be case insensitive. So if strings equal I. And actually, before we fill that out, let's get a convenience pointer, right? So console object. Oh, we have ads. So for those of you who are new to the stream, one of the things that we like to do is we like to pause the stream whenever ads come up so that nobody misses content, right? So on the Twitch side, we're served ads once every 90 seconds, or once every 90 seconds, that'd be terrible. Once every 30 minutes for 90 seconds. We just like to pause during that so that anybody that's getting ads doesn't miss content, right? And it gives me a chance to hydrate too. And I see that there are questions in chat, so I'll answer those when we come back, when ads are done. I see there's some comments over on the YouTube side too that I need to address as well. We're almost done with ads. We had another 15 seconds or so. Almost done. All right, and ads are dead. All right, cool. So for anybody that had ads there, I just like to pause the stream whenever ads come up so that you guys don't miss content, right? So I usually wait to answer chat messages until then. All right, so over on the YouTube side, Bad Comic, hello. What's going on? The only gripe I have with Unreal Engine 5 is that nanite technology, which is still kind of cool, I feel like is being used to encourage not optimizing geometry, and that results in increasing the total size of games. That's certainly a worry, right? It's certainly a valid concern. Fat Gertini, thank you for the follow, by the way. So yeah, that's it's not the only gripe, but it's the main gripe. Yeah, that's a valid point for sure. And I think that's games and software as a whole. Like, things aren't as optimized these days as they should be, right? We're throwing away CPU cycles like you wouldn't believe, right? Just look at anything on the web and how long it takes to load a web page these days. From like, good to see you. Hello, just saying hi. I would initialize result to false and set it to true only when reaching a success condition. It's easy to forget setting it, and then result success from actually returning a failing function. Yeah, so that's a valid point, and I may switch it to that. Usually when I'm debugging things, I don't, but there are plenty of places where I follow that pattern as well. Yeah, that's certainly a valid train of thought. I just don't completely have this spec'd out in terms of how I want it yet, right? So if you want to use modern engines like Unreal, you need to have a decent graphics card. Technologies comes with hardware. Yes, that's true. But there are certain things that could absolutely be optimized better, right? Not only for space, but also, for performance, right? I feel like that gets kind of thrown away now, and people just over-rely on tools to do it for them, and tools are only so smart, right? Okay, so let's see. Are you self-taught, or did you go to school for this? I assume you mean the programming aspect of it. Not that it matters, just curious. Yeah, no, that's a valid question. As far as programming goes, I am self-taught. I did go to college. I do have a degree, but it's in game art and design. And I decided right before I graduated in that I actually like programming better than the art side, right? So I actually have a strong background in art as well. But I've been programming since, I started writing in QBasic on an MS-DOS machine when I was like 7, right? Because I'm a gigantic nerd. And so, I've been programming a long time, and I just kind of made the decision that that's what I wanted to do. And so I've taught myself everything I know. I didn't learn any of it in school. But I do have a degree, I just don't use it. Whiskey time? I do have a keg back there, technically, or a little whiskey barrel, right? I don't know if you guys can see it, but I do actually have one back there, and it does actually have whiskey in it. You're not wrong. Yeah, the programming aspect. Yep, exactly. Lulz web. Yeah, exactly. Web is where they definitely just completely threw away the idea of trying to optimize for performance, right? It is so slow and so heavy. Node modules is always the example I use for any web devs out there that know what I'm talking about. But yeah, I won't get on a soapbox about that because I've done it a number of times. A lot of people have degrees they don't put to use. Yep, me too, for sure. My degree is not in computer science technically, right? Not for this, right? I've taught myself everything I know. Okay, so we have console object, and this is going to be the address of state pointer registered objects sub I. And then here we can say object name, and we'll compare that against expression copy, right? Because we can actually just literally use the whole expression for that. And if we have a match, then to do print to console, right? And then and technically that means result, not return true. I want a result true. Result equals true, right? And then we'll just fall through and do this cleanup, right? Geolicious5 and Tech256, thank you for the follow. I appreciate that. You went to college for astrophysics? That's awesome. You haven't used a telescope in around 5 years. Yeah, that's a good example, I guess, right? So do you do something else that's completely unrelated to that? Gigs of node modules on my PC, it's a mess. Exactly what I'm referring to. I knew somebody out there would understand what I was getting at with that, for sure. I'm sure you still learned a lot in college. I'm sure it was interesting. Everything about video game development really interests me. Yes, I'm a nerd. Yeah, so I did learn a lot, right? So most of what I learned was more so on the art side of things, right? So how to model stuff, how to optimize, your triangle count, how to use those utilities and things like that. Making textures on your own and things like that. So, there was quite a lot that I learned on that. And of course, there was a networking aspect of it too. So, I still talk to a lot of those folks that I went to school with as well. But yeah. Oh, you make game engines. Nice. So from astrophysics to making game engines. That's awesome. I like it. Taman, how's it going? Good to see you. Welcome. Trash can, go Brazilian. Yes, we have a strong Brazilian crowd in chat. Just keep pumping up the numbers, guys. Eventually, you guys will just take over all of chat, and it'll just, I'll have to learn Portuguese. Brazilian Portuguese, to be specific. Let's see. Strong background in art makes a lot more sense at making games than just a computer science background. Engineers are really crude. Some are. I'm just a nerd who likes making things come up on the screen and do stuff, right? I think it's awesome that you can actually just essentially edit a text file and make things happen on the computer. That's always fascinated me. That's what got me into it, right? I'm usually iffy with old technology aesthetics, but holy fuck, I miss the old web a lot. It was just completely different landscape. Yes, I miss the whole web, the old web a lot. And I realized I just dropped an F-bomb there. That's a rare thing, right? Happens every once in a while, though. But for example, this is what my personal website looks like. Old web. Simple. There is no JavaScript behind this. There is no database behind this. It's all just raw HTML, right? There is a little bit of PHP only to get consistent headers, but that's it, right? Old school. I love it. It's much faster. Look how, I mean, it loads really quickly. Right? So yes, I totally am with you on that. Let's see. The main thing with education for the games industry is really just networking. Yeah, that's a big part of it, right? I can tell you that the education that I received, while I learned a lot, I don't feel like I learned a lot enough to make an entire game on my own, right? There were still lots that I had to do on my own to figure out that stuff. So rules. This chat is Portuguese only. Yeah, no. We don't talk about node modules, the heaviest object directory in the universe. Yeah, exactly. You're just using an adjective? Yeah. I suppose, though. I suppose so. 90s aesthetic. Yeah, exactly. I love that. When I started doing games in Unreal, I wasn't enjoying that much, I think. And then when I found engine programming, graphics programming, it kind of clicked. Same for me. I made lots of cool stuff in Unreal 2 and Unreal 3. But yeah, it was, I kind of got away from it early Unreal 4, right? Is when I just kind of stopped using that all the time. I played around with Unreal 5, but any game that I release is going to be on my own engine for sure. Let's see. I'm a beginner yet, but even though it takes longer for me to learn these topics better, I enjoy more. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? It's not a race. You really like UE5? Yeah, UE5 has a lot of good things going for it, for sure. But it's a big boy. It's a big boy engine. It's heavy. At the time, Unreal 2 was all the rage. I didn't even know how to properly turn on a computer. Yeah, I know I'm dating myself by saying that, for sure. I don't know what happened to it, but at one point I did have a CD that actually had the original Unreal game on it, like the very first one that was released in 99. I've got that somewhere. Came with my Sound Blaster card. Yep. Yeah, CD, right? Yeah. Not talking a certificate of deposit. Anyway. Does that exist? Yeah. Compact disc. I just got rid of my tape drive a couple years ago. Don't judge me. Anyway, all right, so we're going to print that to console. This, we will break the loop, right? Because at that point we've found and done what we need to do. If we each reach the end of this loop and we've not found it, then we're going to throw an error message. And we're going to say identifier not found. Or should I say identifier not found? Identifier is undefined. And we're going to put that in single quotes, and we'll say expression copy. Ah, dang it. Expression copy. Right, and then result equals false. And I'm actually going to jump again. And the reason I'm doing this is because I might wind up having something else down here that I need to do. In fact, I probably will. So we'll just go ahead and do another jump that way. And so at this point, what we essentially need to do is we found a variable, right? So we essentially want to print its type. So what I'm going to do is we're actually going to turn this into another static function. This one I think can be, doesn't need a return type. And we'll do console object print. And in this case, all it's going to take is the console object itself. And I think that's actually all we need. So in here, we're basically going to switch, and we're going to look at object type, And based on that, we're going to do something different. So case, console, object type. Let's do int32 first. And we'll do, let's see, should I just print this? I'll probably just print it in line, honestly. So we'll do, how do I want to do this? Like an info? I guess we'll do a k-info. And we'll format this as an I. And we'll do object block. Right? And then what we'll have to do is cast that to a i32 pointer. Wrap that entire thing. And then dereference that to get the actual value of it. Right? And then break. So the next case is going to look almost the same. So we're going to just say uint32, and this is just going to be literally a u32, and then a u there, and then the next one we're going to look at is f32, because again, it's also close. Right, so that's that. And then we'll also do Boolean. And this is going to be a B8. But what we'll do is I'm actually going to separate this out in this case. So we're going to say B8 val equals this, right? And then we're going to say if val, we're going to print true, otherwise we'll print false. And this needs to be a string, right? So we'll just treat that as a string. And then otherwise, if we have a struct, this is going to be the one that's a little bit weird to handle. So we're basically going to have to recursively handle this guy, right? So we'll do a u32 length equals object properties, and we want darray length of that. We should also probably check to see if that exists. So object properties, right? If we have that, then we'll do this stuff. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense to. And then we'll do a loop. I is less than length. Oops. Plus plus I. Oops. Plus plus I. There we go. And what we're going to do there is call console object print. And we'll pass the address of object properties sub I. And that will recursively print the values. The only thing I think we should probably do is maybe indent these with like spaces or something for each level of recursiveness, just to kind of mark what that is. All right, let me catch up on chat because it looks like I missed some stuff here. I missed a lot of chat. Okay. So let's see. Is goto a good gamma statement in C language? I mean, it's fine. It's a feature of the language, right? Are you using C for the whole project? Why not C++, at least partially? We are using C for the whole project. So the reason I chose C over C++ is there's a couple reasons. First off, we don't use object-oriented programming here. So there's that, right? I don't need that. That's the biggest feature of C I don't need. I don't use templates. I don't use operator overloads, right? Those are big ones as well. I don't use classes, right? Obviously. And so I don't use most of the same things that C++ provides, right? I want the challenge as well, right? But also C compiles much faster. It's a much simpler language, right? It's much easier to look at and read C code than it ever is to read C++, especially templated C++, especially with all the name spacing and all the other crap that goes along with it, right? Double colons everywhere and stuff like that. C++ has become a very complex and bloated language, and I use it in places where I have to, but unless I have to, I don't use it. So the other thing is because we're writing this in C, you could write libraries in C++ or a lot of other things and interface with it, right? Because it's written in C, it'll work with just about anything. Whereas C++ does some symbol mangling and things like that. You have to kind of work around that stuff. C, we don't have to worry about that, right? All right. So let's see. UE5 is awesome, but I just don't feel like creating games. That's fair. It was a 700 megabyte game. It was under that actually, because it came on. So we're still talking about the original Unreal game, right? So the game itself came on a CD along with the audio drivers and software for a Creative sound card. So it was under 700 megs. I don't recall exactly how big the install size was, but it was small. Games used to be really small, guys. I mean, if you like, to put it into perspective, a Nintendo NES cartridge held less than the size of a JPEG. Right? So, yeah. Like, you could not store a screenshot of Super Mario in an image that was less than the size of the actual cartridge, right? A screenshot of that, the image of a screenshot of Super Mario, the original one, is actually larger than the entire game itself. Just to put it into perspective. I always like the idea of making games, but I kind of hate the actual making gameplay part. Then I discovered graphics programming, and that's fair, right? Like, I prefer to work on tools and stuff, but I've also done lots of programming on the game logic side as well. Spent several years doing that. Do you know Soding's no build H single header build system for C? It's actually quite nice. Yeah, you know what? I started looking at it. I'm not familiar enough with it to actually use it, but I was actually considering building one on my own. As crazy as that sounds. But yeah, for right now, we just use makefiles, and there's actually only two of them, one for libraries and one for executables, and I'm going to combine those at some point, so we only have one for everything. Have I ever embedded Lua in anything? I have not, but I've worked with projects that have had it done, and it works pretty well. Just watched a video of him using this to build the hash table. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so his no build is pretty sweet. I've watched videos of him using it. I just haven't used it myself. Let's see. There's a lot involved in creating games that is not very attractive to me. Yep, me too, for sure. Talking about scripting languages, I think Kohi should just use Lua and keep the Brazilian thing going. So that's one of the scripting languages I would like to support as a plugin. That and C#. Because I like Lua as far as like configuring NeoVim. It's great. Right? I think it's a fantastic language. You obviously don't want to write like super performant code in that, but for like making quick little utilities and stuff or quick little scripts, yep. It's awesome, right? So yes. Talking about CDs, I remember I used to trick my PS2 into thinking the DVD case was closed when it was actually opened. I felt like a hacker. Yep. I remember doing that with my my PS1, actually. And then you had great games like Grand Theft Auto, like the original Grand Theft Auto, was actually designed so that you could load up the game and then open the PlayStation lid, pop out the disc, and pop in a music CD, and it would play tracks off the music CD as the radio when you got in a car and drove around in it. They actually built that functionality into the game on purpose, right? So they actually loaded the entire game into that tiny ass chunk of memory on the PS1, so that you could do that. It was pretty awesome. He inspired me to create a single header solution for opening window frames on Windows and Linux. X11 Wayland is going to be trickier. Yeah, eventually we're going to be tackling Wayland. Not looking forward to that. Let's see. I like the idea of making a game. I kind of started on it from UE5, and then I got busy with the rest of life stuff. I hear that. But learning more about game development helped me to appreciate all the work that goes into game development. Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm hoping to appreciate or do here, right? Is spread the knowledge of exactly what goes into all this stuff, right? So that maybe people have a better understanding of what goes into making an engine, and what goes into making a game, and how much effort that really takes, right? Because people like to go, oh, game devs suck and stuff like this, when a game has glitches. But what they don't see is the fact that that team, busted ass on that, and they were forced to release it early by forces outside of their power, like Cyberpunk, for example, right? And that's the half of it that people don't see and don't understand, and they want to point the finger and blame the devs, and it's like, it's the business side of things doing that, right? And if people, I think, understood everything that goes into making a game, they might change their mind a little bit on that. You gave up using Unreal when you spent over 15 minutes waiting for it to open. You uninstalled it before it finished loading. Yeah, so that's a problem, right? Like I said, it's a big boy. It's heavy. 15 minutes is really strong. Like, that's crazy, though. The first open is always so long. Yeah, because I would imagine it's like building shaders and stuff like that, if I had to guess. At the time I was in Unreal, I upgraded my RAM from 16 gigabytes to 32 gigabytes, and today I barely touch an Unreal. Yeah, I remember those low spec machines. I remember being excited when I got a Voodoo 3 graphics card back in the day, which I think had 16 megs of RAM. Brownhounds, good to have you here. Have a good night. The whiskey overpowered you. Yeah, have a good one. Get some rest. Dark Arts Black Magic Go-To is scary. It really isn't, right? It's really just a jump. That's all it is. Have you considered making console object block a union? Looks like right now it's a pointer to dynamically allocated memory. So it's not necessarily dynamic allocated memory. What it can be is it can be a pointer to these types or a structure, right? Or anything else. And I wanted to keep that kind of open on purpose. So that the idea behind it is that, for example, when you're creating a scene and you have the meshes in the scene, the mesh could be this console object type struct, right? And so the pointer that we pass there for the object block could be an actual pointer to that struct. And then the pointer to the properties within that would be based on that struct, right? It's kind of the idea there. I don't know how it's going to work out. We'll see. But yeah, it should be able to be a pointer to anything, essentially. And where it's allocated or how it's allocated is outside the concern of this, right? That's up to the caller to make sure that's managed correctly. Not to mention C++ errors. C errors already not the best. C++ errors are even worse, especially templated ones. Yep, I agree. The only two things I don't like C formatting are curlies on new line and the arrow on pointer things. Yeah, the arrow is a little bit weird, but I guess I'm so used to it that now I'm actually thrown when it's not there. So you mean the curlies on the new line, like when people do that? that annoys me. That's a waste of space, vertical space, right? That's hugely annoying to me. It's kind of amazing to think about how small games were. It always impresses me that the PS2 had 32 megabytes of RAM. Yep, exactly. Yes, that's why, well, I will come back to that because we have ads. So for those of you who are new to the stream, we like to pause the stream whenever ads come up, at least on the Twitch side, because we are served those every 30 minutes for 90 seconds, right? So I do see that there are a couple comments over here on YouTube. I see those, so I'll get to those afterwards as well, right? I'm going to hydrate and give my voice a break just for a second. So we've got about 40 seconds left on ads. Roberto, I love ads. They remind me I'm alive. I love it. Full house tonight. Yes, definitely. Love it. No problem there from my perspective, right? Got about 15 seconds left on ads and we will be good to go. All right, and ads are dead. All right, so just to finish up the conversation on the PS2 games, right? So yeah, it only had 32 megabytes of RAM, right? So one thing that was really common starting in the PS2 era was the streaming of assets. And that's why the CD-ROM or the DVD-ROM drive was always working its ass off, is because it was constantly loading and unloading assets as like you went through the world, right? Because there weren't enough resources to keep all that stuff in memory all at once. So you're constantly streaming in and out assets, and that disk was constantly being worked on, which is why those drives failed all the time in the PS2, right? It wasn't really built with that in mind, but that's kind of what people found out that they could do and then started using the crap out of it. We need to get back into making games to take less space, and I don't need a single game taking up 20% of my 1 terabyte SSD. I 100% agree with that. I definitely think there's a lot of things that we can do to get around that, right? Will your scripting language compile to bytecode? So I use the term scripting language here loosely, right? Like the thing we're making now is definitely not a scripting language. It's going to be nowhere near Turing complete. But when we implement plugins to load things like C# and Lua, those will compile to bytecode. So AngelScript would be nice. I can't speak to that. I've never used it. Metal Gear Solid made you switch CDs mid-game. Yeah, so did Final Fantasy VII. Yep. And 8. And 9. I actually kind of miss games where we had to switch CDs mid-game, right? Some nostalgia with that. Game had sick immersion mechanics, yeah. They also did some really cool things with save files back then. For this formatting, you should be able to configure that now. The C standard doesn't enforce anything. Right, yeah, so I have an auto formatter installed. So I have it configured the way that I prefer it. Bo Christensen, hello. First time chat, welcome to the stream. You use VS Code, vomit. Auto formatter and it defaults to that. Yeah, but you can configure that too, actually. But yeah, I can't stand that. Like having all of your code like this for every little thing. Like it just, like all the extra lines that you waste by doing that. It's rubbish, in my opinion. Metal Gear Solid 1 and 2 were really nice. Metal Gear Solid 3 went a bit overboard with the mechanics. Yeah, I would agree with that. Totally agree with you. And blame the team. Didn't blame the team for CD Projekt for Cyberpunk. Yep, exactly. The developers needed more time. They said they needed more time. But they just had to shove the game out before it was ready. Yep. And that's the problem with setting due dates that aren't realistic, right? That game was nowhere near ready to release when it was released. Feature complete, maybe, but beta version at most. Let's see. Over on the YouTube side, what best resource do you know for learning CPP? What benefits would learning CPP give someone who knows Java and doesn't want to do performance-oriented projects anytime soon? So it really depends on why you want to learn C++, right? So if you're not going to do anything performance-related, I would question why you're wanting to use it, unless there's some form of like legacy application or something, legacy backend that you want to use. If you're wanting to learn it just to learn it, that's totally cool. The benefit of that would be you learn a lot more about how computers work with that, because especially managing things like pointers and memory allocation and freeing, all that stuff, handling that manually, you definitely learn more, right? Than you do with, something like Java that just kind of does that for you. Dino, thank you for the raid with 10 viewers. I appreciate that. Welcome. How was your stream? What were you working on? Good to see you. Let me give you a shout out, actually. I really appreciate the raid. Thank you. Just answering some questions here real quick on chat, and then I will actually give a quick introduction as to what we're doing here for the raiders. And you know what? Let me actually do that first. So we are developing a engine from scratch called Kohi, and it is a engine that is written in C and using Vulkan as its initial backend. We're writing the whole thing from scratch. And it started off as a YouTube tutorial series, and it has morphed over the years in a couple of different formats. And now we do, live streams on Twitch. And technically it's on Twitch and YouTube now because we simulcast. But we just kind of evolved the format over the years. So a little bit about the game engine itself. It is free and open source. It's available on GitHub. It is Apache 2.0 licensed, which means that if you want to use the engine, all you have to do is say that you use the engine. That's it. There will never be any sort of licensing fees behind it. There will never be any sort of royalties behind it, ever. It is 100% free and always will be. So to that end, all of the the Patreon support, all of the support on Twitch and the YouTube memberships and stuff, those are all optional methods to support my work, but they don't actually unlock anything. I don't paywall anything. My YouTube channel is also, like this whole project is designed to be educational, and I think education should be free. People who want to learn this stuff should be able to do so without having a paywall, right, or having to buy some course or something. And so I'm just kind of trying to create the resource I wish I had when I was learning this stuff. And I'm making the whole thing free. I don't paywall any of it, right? So all of these support things are completely optional, right? And so the engine is being designed with a modular approach or a plugin approach in mind. So Vulkan is just one of the first rendering backends that we're implementing, and we're going for feature complete on that, and then we'll implement others, such as Direct3D and Metal. Couldn't think of it there for a second. We might eventually also do OpenGL, maybe. Haven't really decided. And then the other thing is that the engine is cross-platform, so it works on Windows, Linux, and Mac OS, right? And it runs natively on those. You don't have to use any sort of emulation there, right? So that's kind of the quick and dirty intro there. Even with some of the bugs in Baldur's Gate 3, I didn't really mind. It's hard to catch every single bug before you release it. Yeah, it's never possible, right? No matter how good the game is. 32 megabytes, what? That's crazy. Yeah, PS2 only had 32 megabytes. Yep. So let's see. I'm going to actually scroll down a little bit and see what the raiders have to say, and then I'll go and catch up in chat in just a second. So show the work. Yep, I did. At least as much as I can right now, because I don't... Well, maybe I can compile. Nope, I can't. I didn't think so. All right. What did that actually say, though? Maybe I can just... Oh, you know what? It's bleating because this isn't used. So maybe if I just comment this whole thing. Oh, right. Okay. This one is not... this one's not used either. You know what? Let me just put... Let me just put a call to this in here. Let's see. And I just won't use the console, right? I'm just trying to get this thing to run so I can actually show you guys the engine real fast. Expression parse. And I'm just going to pass null to all these things, right? The exact same thing I said that would never be happening from the application I'm going to do right now, just so I can get this to build. All right, we'll see if that builds. All right, so... Yes, by the way, guys, I really appreciate all of the follows. That means a lot. The support helps me grow the channel and reach more folks, right? We're trying to motivate people to get into the more technical side of game development here, or at least have an understanding of what's behind it, right? So all of those follows definitely help grow the channel, help me reach more people. So I really appreciate that. Thank you. So you're working on a game engine in C++. I have not been able to catch you live yet, but that's probably because I've been streaming at the same time you stream, I think. I've been trying to... I've been looking out for you streaming, but I'm guessing your streaming time overlaps with mine. Open source, my hunger is never enough. Yeah, I get that. Does it compile to WASM? Not yet. I have plans, though. I've been talking with Spiro on potentially doing a really weird collaboration between this and what he's working on. Where's the repo link? Sorry about that. I thought I dropped it in chat. There it is. So if you go to kohi.gameengine.com, it is, if you scroll down, there's contribute on GitHub right here. And so it's github/Travis Vroman/Kohi, right? I think there's also, I think I have a GitHub command in the bot that I can drop. All right. So let's see. Yeah, links are prohibited. You're about to share an image. Yeah, I had to prohibit links because people were spamming it at one point. You can't find the GitHub link on my profile anywhere. Really? I thought I had it in there. All right. Well, I will have to add that. If you go to the main website, though, like I said, which I just dropped in there, I'll drop it again in chat. If you go to that and then scroll down the page and hit contribute on GitHub, it's there. All right. Okay, my AutoMod actually caught this link for some reason and didn't completely just ban it, so I'll allow that one. Hack, I'm a hacker. 192.168, yeah. Hacking the mainframe, exactly. Never saw there was a game dev on Twitch. Yeah, so that's a relatively new category, but yeah. Thor from Pirate Software is actually the one who drove getting that created. All right, cool. Critters, what did you post? I think you must have posted links or something. So links generally aren't allowed to be posted in chat, right? So I think my bot will automatically like detect that and then time you out if you do it, right? Somebody was abusing it, so unfortunately I had to turn it off. But yeah. Anyway, there were a couple of other things up here that I missed. Is there an easy way of doing JavaScript bindings, or do you have to pull in the entire V8 or SpiderMonkey? Oof. Yeah. I mean, the only way that you might... When you say JavaScript bindings, do you mean like parsing JavaScript, or do you mean like exporting? How would you do that, actually? So we would essentially have to build this to WASM, right? And basically write a JavaScript wrapper around that to actually execute on the engine. So that would be something we'd have to do manually, right? Thank you guys for the follows, by the way. I really appreciate that. And yes, thank you for the posture check, because my posture is rubbish. So thank you for that. Bad habit. All right. You posted a link to the GitHub, which I allowed, by the way, but for some reason it timed you out anyways. Okay, yeah. You, Thor, and Spiro make feel like an extended universe with the Heartbound music. Exactly, yeah. I asked Thor if I could use it a long time ago, and he said, yeah, totally. He was fine with it. And so I've been using it for probably the past year. It's just a great soundtrack to kind of have playing in the background. So I love it. All right. I assume the Pikachu's are your choice. Which version of Pokemon is the best? Original 151, Gen 3. I have to say original, Roberto. Original all the way. If I recall correctly, the PS2 did not have certain floating point maths, so triangles jittered a ton. That was the PlayStation 1 that didn't have that. And it also didn't have, was it had or didn't have affine transforms for the textures? It didn't have correct texture projection, so you got like that wavy texture look as well. But yeah, that was the PS1 you were thinking of. Okay, so, did this build successfully? I think it did. Yes, okay. So, let me see if I can run this and make sure I haven't completely busted it yet, because I am working in a feature branch, so it may or may not run. We'll see. All right, so this is our engine before we load a scene. We've just got some basic properties down here. When I load up a scene, you can see that we have sort of a multi-threaded loader working, right? So the engine does use some multi-threading. We recently switched to a PBR lighting pipeline. So we've got a PBR model. We've got cascading shadow maps that we recently added. And then we have also the ability to manipulate objects, right? So everything here, bear in mind, was completely written from scratch. So we actually have the ability to select objects with a gizmo and move them around. And this gizmo, of course, that's just like everything else, was written from scratch, right? So we can change modes on that, rotate it around. We can scale it to our heart's content, right? So we can just kind of do that if we want, right? Or whatever. And so, we've just been basically working on a variety of tools, for the engine as we go, right? We also have a few different rendering modes for like debugging. So we have a lighting only mode that just shows us just the lighting information without albedo textures, basically, or color information. We have a normals mode. We have a shadow cascade mode, like that shows us the different cascades of the shadow maps. So if we get really close here to this guy, we can see that our highest resolution of shadows is real close to the camera. I have this exaggerated right now just to show what that looks like, but we get our super clear shadows close to the camera, and then as we go out, they get less and less clear, right? And so we have 4 cascades. We have red, which is closest, then we have green, then we have the blue, the yellow is final, and then outside of that is white, which basically means shadows are not casted out there. So if we switch back to our normal view, and you kind of watch the shadows here, after we move a certain distance, they will actually smoothly fade out away, right? And that was just something that we kind of added recently as well. And finally, we also have a wireframe mode. So another thing that we did recently was we added terrain chunking and terrain LOD. So we have all these terrain chunks split up like that, and they have levels of detail. So you can see the closest to the camera is the most dense, and then it gets less and less dense as it goes into the distance, because you don't need as much geometry there to be drawn. And so that saves us on drawing, right? So we've been doing a little bit of optimization, a little bit of that kind of thing. And now we're actually developing something to make this debug console a little bit more useful. So that is kind of what we're working on tonight, which is actually accidentally kind of turning into a scripting language, or like a mini scripting language. But that's more or less what we're doing, right? So I hope that helps. Are there any resources people would recommend for Direct3D other than MSDN? There are some tutorials out there that do kind of describe some of the techniques, right? The thing is, like, a lot of concepts transfer from one rendering API to another, right? It's all about just working with the different API. So a lot of what you see on like Learn OpenGL or something like that can be also redone in DirectX, just using the DirectX way of doing things. One that I remember that I followed years ago was, I think, called RasterTech, if I remember correctly. That was one. Also, Chili Tomato Noodle on YouTube does a lot of DirectX stuff, so you'd want to check his channel for that. I think he's writing a DirectX engine, I believe. Those are the two I can think of off the top of my head. And eventually we're going to be doing that here as well, but we're just not there yet. Sponzo's looking great. Yeah, thank you. It's coming along nicely, right? We initially had a Fong lighting model, and we switched to PBR not too long ago, and it's so much nicer. We still have some things to figure out with the PBR. It's still not 100% right, but it's a lot closer. All right. RasterTech, that brings back some memories. Yeah, RasterTech had stuff like Direct3D 9 initially. I don't know if he still has that out, but yeah. Old school for sure. I think the most current stuff he had was DirectX 11, I believe, and maybe some 12 stuff, but I don't think he ever got around to filling that out. He has a Chili Tomato Noodle has a giant playlist on DirectX 11, but he stopped. Oh, that's a bummer. I know his engine was coming along nicely. That's a bummer. Well, we will not be stopping here unless I get hit by a bus. Not that I want that to happen, but, you know. It's going to take something pretty major to make me stop doing this. Okay. Yeah, sad face. Funny story, actually. I have actually been hit by a bus before. No joke. So when I was in my first year of high school, I was walking through the bus loop area, and they had this sort of bus loop where all the buses parked, right? And it was only supposed to be one lane wide, right? And buses basically all line up, and you just find your bus, you get on it, and then they take you home, right? But my bus was on the other side of the loop, right? So you had a loop that kind of went around like this. My bus was on the other side of the loop. And so what I and a lot of other kids would do would be to cut through the bus loop, cut through the field that's in the middle of that, and get to the bus on the other side. And as I was doing that, a bus that was supposed to be parked on the other side was cutting around the other buses in the grass, and didn't hit their brakes quick enough and literally hit me with it. Now, granted, he was only going about 10 miles an hour, right? But I can still say I got hit by a bus, and I know what it feels like. It was enough to knock me over and put me under it, right? Thankfully, I didn't actually get run over, but I got hit by it. So yes, I know what it feels like to be hit by a bus. Anyway. Kids are bouncy. Yeah, exactly. And the huge-ass backpack that I had on with all the books and stuff. Yeah, only 10 miles an hour. I mean, it wasn't that bad, honestly. And it was in grass, too, which helped. Yeah. I didn't even realize what happened at first either. Kind of just took me a second to realize, like, oh, that's a thing that happened. Okay, cool. Let's see. I followed Brainzarsoft for Direct3D 11. I thought he had all OpenGL stuff on there. I didn't realize that was also Direct3D. Maybe I'm thinking of somebody else. Also help being a kid, I suppose. Yeah, exactly. Pet on stream redeem for 1,000 points. Oh, you guys are super lucky, actually. My cat just walked in here. Let me go get her. So, let me just switch to a different camera here. There we go. So this is Pumpkin. I've shown her on stream before, but this is my 13-year-old Japanese bobtail. Yeah, she's definitely my cat, right? she definitely hangs out with me and likes to stick to me like glue a lot, right? So she hangs out here with me in my office. And she's not usually super enthused about being picked up. Yeah, she wants to go. So I'm going to put her down, but yeah, this is her. Oops, backwards. There we go. Thank you for that redeem, though. Yeah, she is a beautiful cat. Absolutely. Yeah, she's as it turns out, she's a purebred Japanese bobtail. We rescued her from the pound. That would hurt? Yeah, it did hurt a little bit, for sure. All right, cool. So let me switch this back to a camera so you guys can actually see the code this time, because I forgot to do that last time. All right. My problem with some Direct3D tutorials and books is that they haven't exactly been updated, so a lot of them use stuff like D3DX, which as far as I know is a deprecated library. Yeah, that is a problem, for sure. And they don't tell you that you don't have to use that library. Is the other annoying part about it, right? Like when we go to do DirectX work or Direct3D work, we're going to use our own math library for that. And they don't really go into doing it another way. Yeah, exactly. Yep. All right. So I'm going to get rid of this because we don't need that. We will eventually need that, but I don't want it in there like that. All right. So we need to print to console. We were kind of in the middle of developing that. So what we're going to do is uncomment this guy. So we have this console object print. And the way that this works is if we have a console object that we are passing here, it could either be essentially a variable or it could be a struct that contains variables, right, or properties. So we covered all these types. Oh, right, I wanted to handle indenting. So let's do, we'll call this U32. Actually, really, realistically, it can just be a U8 indent, right? And that's just going to be sort of the indent level. And each time we go into a struct, we're going to up that by 1. So we're going to say indent plus plus, right? And then when we go in here, we'll pass indent there, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to use that to just sort of bump the text over. So typically when we call this, it should be an indentation of 0. And then, we'll sort of indent as we go. So I'm trying to think how I want to handle this in terms of actually getting that inserted here. So I think what we're going to do is at the top here, we'll just create a buffer, like an indent buffer. We'll call it character indent buffer. And it'll be an array of 256 characters. And we'll just set all that to 0. And then what we'll do is for u8 I equals 0, I is less than 256 plus plus I. Oh, ads. Okay. We have ads, so I'm going to pause the stream while we have ads. That way nobody misses any content. So we're going to pause for 90 seconds, and we'll be back after that. I'm going to drink some water. We've got a little under a minute to go. I know over on the YouTube side, you guys don't get ads like the Twitch side does, but I'm trying to account for the lowest common denominator, right? So just over 30 seconds left to go. Okay. Ads are almost done. All right, ads are dead. Cool. Tourist Travels, first time chatter, by the way, welcome. You only got one ad this time. Yeah, so the way that ads work on Twitch is you get up to 90 seconds of ads. So depending on what platform you're on and also what region and locale you're in, the amount of ads that you get will vary. So some people might get the full 90 seconds. Some people might get 30 seconds of an ad. Some people might not get any at all, right? And so that's why there's a little bit of a discrepancy there. But I have to account for the lowest common denominator, which is the 90-second full thing, right? I just love the internet in my house. My phone just let me know that you were streaming. Awesome. Very cool. Thomas McRow, thank you for the follow. I appreciate that. Welcome. Let me just check YouTube real quick. I could be talking crap about the Twitch chat and they wouldn't even know. Well, yeah, so, I mean, some of them would, right? Anybody with a sub would. Anybody that has Twitch Turbo would know. And anybody that's not getting served ads, right? Because some people don't get served ads or they don't get served the full 90 seconds, right? But that's funny. That's very funny. Okay. So we have this indent buffer. And why did I say 256 here? This should be, and that's going to be an overflow anyways, it should be indent, right? So for each indent, we're going to say indent buffer sub I is equal to a space. Let's see, maybe 2 spaces per indentation, right? I don't want to do 4 because that can add up really quickly, but 2 spaces should be enough. So maybe we do indent times 2. Right? And then we set our iterator to be a U16 just so we don't overflow. That should be fine, right? So we do this. And then +1, right? It's kind of a brute force way to do it. I could write a function that does it for us, like maybe a pad function or something like that, but simple is good enough here, right? So we're just going to do that every time we have an indent, right? And then we'll take, let's see, we'll do, you know what, let me move this, this I. Let me think about this for a second. This should also be I plus equals 2, right? Because otherwise that's going to be wrong. And I need to extract this out, actually. So it should be U16. Do I want to use I? I don't really want to use I here. IDX, I guess we'll call it, equals 0, right? So let's do away with this. And we'll say IDX and IDX. And the reason we want this is because, whoops. How many times am I going to hit the wrong button? There we go. So the reason we want this is so that when we get to the end of the array, we can make sure that that is set to 0, just to be absolutely safe. So we could say indent buffer IDX equals 0, right? And then for each one of these, we'll do a string in front of it, and then we'll do indent buffer, right? And we'll just kind of change that all the way down, right? So let's just do the string first. Right? And then indent buffer. And the same thing here. Right? So then we increase the indent when we get to a structure, and then when we print the values of that structure out at the next level, we'll have that. So that should recursively go through, and that way if we have a struct of a struct of a struct, it'll just keep indenting, right? Thank you for the posture check, Ruche. I have a bad habit of having a bad posture when I'm under a lot of stress. So, yeah, that's not great. Nate's Code followed. I appreciate that, as well as Taurus Travels. Thank you for the follow. Appreciate that. Hope you are doing well. Let's see. Is this C? Yes, it is. Yep. You just started programming, spent last 72 hours learning Python. Awesome. And welcome to the fray. That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. And good luck, definitely. I don't know how much help I can offer with Python, but programming in general, I can certainly offer some help there if you need it, right? You can see the file type in the bar at the bottom. That is true. It is down here. Yeah, so there's the full path is over here. It's also listed here, right? So there's that. You should allocate 512 characters in indent buffer for that case. Yeah, that's probably true. Because otherwise, but I mean, man, if we're indenting 255 times, that's nuts. 513 actually. I mean, I might just programmatically limit how many times we indent, right? Like maybe after we go 8 indentations, I'll just stop it, right? But yeah, I'll be safe. Okay. Vinny, thank you for the Prime subscription. I appreciate that. Thank you for the support. That means a lot, and I really appreciate it. Thank you. All right. Cool. I think I'm finally caught up on chat. Awesome. So we have our recursive print function. So now that all we have to do here is call print, and our indent is going to be 0 as we said before, and then the object itself is literally just going to be object, and that's it. So we have that. So at this point, we should be able to print an operator just by typing in its, or not an operator, an identifier just by typing its name. One thing that we don't have, though, is we don't have this function hooked up, right? So I'm just going to actually kind of hard code this in place now, just to kind of get something up and running, and we'll sort of tweak this repeatedly as we go, right? KGB87, thank you for the follow. Appreciate that. Welcome. You're learning with me. Thank you. I appreciate that, and I'm glad you're learning, and I'm glad you find it useful. So I appreciate that. Thank you. That's the whole point here, is to help spread the knowledge, right, and hopefully folks learn. If you have 2 monitors, it might be worth doing 256 indentations. Yeah. Okay. Maybe. I think I'm probably going to wind up cutting that off at some point. But then again, if your nested objects are that deep, I also have other questions, right? Diva, thank you for the 1 month tier 1 sub. I appreciate that. You actually kicked off a hype train, so thank you for that. I appreciate that. Hype train. Let's see. So in this case, we want to do console expression parse. The expression that we're going to pass right now is going to be, we're just going to pass command for now. We're eventually going to tokenize and break that up. And then Thomas McRowe, thank you for the 1 month tier sub subscription. I appreciate that. Tier sub subscription. I'm tired. Tier 1 sub is what I mean to say. I really appreciate that support. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you. Last night's hype train was insane. Yeah, we got to a level 9 hype train last night, which was absolutely bonkers. I've definitely never seen it jump that high. That was really cool to see. So we need console object type. And in this case, we're going to just say parsed type. Oh, thank you for the 100 bits. I appreciate that. Diva, thank you for the 5 gifted subs. I really appreciate that support. Thank you so much. That means a lot. It really does. It helps me out a lot right now. So thank you for that. I really do appreciate that. Hype train level 2 achieved. Dev power. I love it. Choo choo. I love it. Yes, thank you so much for that support. I greatly appreciate it. It means a lot. So we have our parse type here that we're going to get, and then our out value is just going to be a block of memory, right? So I'm actually just going to do this as a complete hack right now. We're just going to call this block, and then we're going to say kallocate. Literally the size of a void pointer, right? And then memory tag. How do I want to tag this? I guess it really doesn't matter. You know what? I'll use unknown, because anytime you use memory tag unknown, it actually bleats at you. Although we are doing this in the console, that's going to create noise. So let me not do that. I'll just do memory tag array. It's fine. So we'll use an 8-byte block of memory. So the type is going to be the address of parsed type, and then the out value is just going to be block, if I could spell it right. Okay. Obviously, we should probably check that to make sure it was successful, right? So we'll say if it was successful, we could do something with it, right? To do cast to appropriate type and use somehow. We already printed to the console, so that's good enough for right now, right? Even though our parse probably shouldn't do that, but for now, that's what I'm going to do. Entrop, thank you for the follow. I appreciate that. Welcome. welcome to the stream. All right. So, do we have enough to actually try this? I think yes from this perspective. But we need to actually register these somewhere, right? We actually need to register an object and add properties somewhere. So let's actually go to our simple scene. And I'm going to do, oops, I have the H file. I don't want that. Simple scene.c. And we're going to go to simple scene. Should we do this during load? Probably load. Let me think. What level do I want to add this at? I suppose we could do load because at that point we will have everything that we need to know, right? So let's do register with the console. Oh, we don't have console included. So let's do include core console. Console object register. So the object name is going to just be scene. That's just what I'm going to call it for right now. That's going to be the active scene. And then the object that we're going to pass is just going to be scene. Hype train complete at level 3, 33%. Total of 8 sub gifts and 100 bits. I really appreciate that. Thank you again so much for the support there. I really do appreciate that. Mr. Blah, thank you for the follow. Appreciate that. All right. So the type of this is going to be console object type struct. Right, so we have a struct that's registered there. And then we have, let's see, what's some property that we could add? I don't know, I guess let's do ID for right now, right? So we'll just do console add property. The object name is still going to be scene. Right, so we should probably find maybe a way to store that off. The property name that we're going to do is ID. And then the property itself is going to be the address of scene.id. Right, and then the console object type is a U32, if I recall correctly. Right, let's double check that. Pretty sure. Yeah, it's a U32. Right, so we should get the scene object printed, which actually, did we actually print? I don't believe we actually did. Yeah, so if we actually have a type of struct, we don't actually print anything. We just print the properties of that. So we should probably print something about it in general. So console object print. Oh wait, no, we don't need to do that. We need to do a kinfo. And I think here we'll just do the object name, right? So we'll say here object name, right? We'll just do that as a kinfo. That way we at least get some idea within that sort of indented hierarchy what it is that we're looking at. So we're going to do a console object register on the scene and then just a single property for right now, ID. And obviously we should undo that when we unload the scene, but I just want to test it and see how it works. Okay. So what should happen, that is if I got all the pieces right, which I don't know that I did, is when we load this, you should be able to go into the console and type scene and hit enter. Okay, identifier is undefined scene. Command scene does not exist. But it did. It did actually do the thing. So I think that's because we forgot to actually update the error condition in the function. But if we see there, it actually printed the scene and printed its ID, which is 1. So somehow everything that I programmed between last night and tonight was completely correct, and we got it right the first try, which like never happens. So that's kind of awesome. Can't really argue with that. All right. So we just have to fix basically this little issue here. Like if we have done this and printed the value of it, then we should be okay, right? The only other thing that we need to do is like we need to have the ability to say scene.id next. Right? That's kind of the next bit that we need to do, because this won't exist, right? The command scene ID doesn't exist, and there's no identifier scene.id, right? So that's the next bit that we're gonna have to figure out. My code works, and I don't know why. I do know why it works. I'm just surprised it does, right? I get scared when something works right the first time. Usually means I messed up badly somewhere. Yeah, exactly. I am a little suspicious of that, but I mean, it is what it is, right? I really do need to fix this bug at some point too. I know I keep saying that, but it's like unrelated to what we're doing. Probably fix it off camera. But yeah, it's always nice when your code works the first time, because it's such a rare thing that you're actually surprised. Especially when you've written as much as we've written in the last couple of nights, across different files and stuff like that. All right. So in our console expression parse, before we even get to this, the next thing that we need to do is we actually need to you probably need to split the string by dot, is what I'm thinking is going to be the next case. And then we'll basically iterate down that list until we hit the last dot or the last thing. We'll have to also check to see if there's like a dot at the end not followed up by anything.
Hell yeah, blind coding is awesome when it actually works, lol.
Yes, I agree. Thank you for testing my TTS, by the way, and thank you for the 1,000 bits. I really appreciate that. That's a lot of bits, so I appreciate that. Yeah, that's actually the first time somebody's activated TTS on the channel. So thank you for that. If you guys aren't aware, there is TTS available for 100 bits plus. So that is a thing. If you use 100 bits and then you type a message with it. Why does it sound British? Because it is the British Brian voice. Yeah. So it is British. Yep. It's sort of the default text-to-speech voice that Streamlabs uses, right? British. Yes, exactly. All right. Thank you for the stretch. Appreciate that. Oh, my elbow just popped. I don't know if you guys heard that. Apparently it needed a stretch as well. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do is handle the sort of, I guess it is a dot operator, right? How we're going to have to handle that is going to vary based on what we're doing. But for now, I'm just going to kind of handle it in this case. And then we'll split out and handle some of these operators separately. We're eventually going to have to parse this like character by character and build out our proper tokens and stuff like that. But for right now, I'm just trying to kind of play around with this and get a feel for how it should work. All right, so these are the registered objects we're looking for. So we don't necessarily want to do this yet. So we want to check for a dot operator, which indicates a property of a struct. So I guess we can say I32 dot index equals string index of this one. And we'll look at expression copy. And the character we're looking for is a dot. And then if dot index is not equal to -1, then we'll have to parse each portion and figure out the hierarchy. Hierarchy. I always spell that word wrong. I probably have spelled it wrong there too. Struct property hierarchy. Right. Otherwise we can just do this. Right. So if we don't have that, we can just kind of fall back on the logic that we already have. So let me see something here real quickly. Okay. So if we have to parse each part of this, realistically what we need is a string split. Right? So we're going to do a character array. We're going to do an array of character arrays, right? Or an array of strings. We're going to call this... didn't we already actually do this somewhere? No, not in here. Okay, so I guess we'll call this parts. And then I think it's possible for us to just say darray creates. The type is going to be character pointer. And then we can do string split. The string we want to split is expression copy. The delimiter is a dot. The triple pointer here to the string darray is going to be the address of parts. Trim entries, we want to do that. We do want to trim the entries. And then include empty is false. Right, so we don't want to include empty entries. Does this return a Boolean to indicate success, or is it, what does it return? I forget. The number of entries yielded by the split operation. Okay, so U32 split count. Perfect. All right. So we'll do a string split on that. And then we're basically going to have to iterate all the way down, getting our sort of objects as we go. So the way I'm thinking of doing this is yeah, I guess we can do it split count, right? So U32 S equals 0. S is less than split count ++s. So the first thing that we're going to want to do, you know what, we're going to be iterating a lot in line if we do this right here. We should probably have something like this that'll just return a pointer to an object for us, like a convenience function. We have ads. So for those of you who are new here, we just like to pause the stream whenever ads come up on the Twitch side so that nobody misses any content. That way, we don't have people trying to, having to go back to the VODs and watch what they missed because there's a big old ad screen covering it, right? So it's every 30 minutes for 90 seconds, right? So it's not all that long, and it gives me a chance to hydrate as well. And then we'll get back to it. Got about 30 seconds left on ads, and then we'll be good to go. All right, and I think, yep, ads are dead. Cool. Little 314, little pie. I like that. Thank you for the follow. Appreciate that. Let's see. Do these coffee points on Twitch help you in any way? No, they're mostly for you guys, right? Just to have like little redeems and fun things. I've actually wanted to expand that a little bit and maybe add some other cool, interesting stuff that maybe you guys could save up points for. So I'm trying to think of some stuff there. If you guys happen to think of anything that might be a cool reward, right? Because Tammin, for example, you have a crap ton of them. Something that might be a cool reward, feel free to suggest it in the Discord server so I see it, because I am looking for suggestions on that. It wasn't something that I set up in the beginning because you don't even get those until you're an affiliate, which took me a while, right? And then, I haven't had a lot of viewers up until recently, right? So, if you guys think of anything that would be kind of a cool redeem, head on over to the Discord server. I will throw a link in chat. There it is. And I'll throw this also over on the YouTube side so that you guys see it as well. We do have a Discord server, by the way. There's about 700 people on there last time I looked. A little over that. It might be 800 at this point. But yeah, we do have a Discord server. And I would say go ahead and drop it in the Kohi channel, right? And that way I'll see it. And feel free to ping me on there. It's cool if you ping me if I told you to ping me, right? So yeah, just at me on there so I see it. And I'll get those added in. I'm looking for suggestions there. I'm also looking for suggestions of emotes that you guys would like to see. Pet on stream is nice, but if I were to redeem all of it, your cat would murder. Probably, yes. She'd find me in my sleep and murder my face. Absolutely. She would not like that all at once. I think there's a limit on those, if I recall, but I'd have to look up for sure to see what that is. But yeah, I do need to come up with something for you guys that have a lot of points, right? I just haven't been able to come up with something yet. So definitely, if you think of anything, let me know. All right, so basically, I'm going to take this and just make a bit of a convenience function. In fact, let's see, I could probably do that. I could probably do that right here. That's fine. So static console object pointer, console object get, and we'll just call that, we'll take a const character array name, and then paste this in there. And let's see. Oh boy. Do you guys want to see the evil cat, aka the one who's a real butthole? Oh god, you're chunky. Okay. All right, this is a bit of a free redeem, right? But this is Rin. He's named after King Varian Rin in World of Warcraft. He's a gigantic jerk, right? He likes to bite and claw and other stuff. We rescued him, and yeah, he's a very special boy. And I'm pretty sure that at this point, I don't think anybody else would actually want to keep him, because he is a jerk, and he's wiggly. So we rescued him, and we're kind of stuck with him now. Gigantic jerk, yes. And he sits on my hand all at once. Let me switch this so you guys can see. So he sits just on my hand, just like that. And that's the only way he sits. If I hold him any other way, he freaks out. Yes, this is the murdery cat. I don't know if he looks innocent to you guys or whatnot, but he's not. So this is the not nice one. He's behaving right now, but if I praise him too much, he won't behave. So I have to be careful about that. But yeah, this is the other one. He's all white except for where they ran out of paint on his tail. He's primer gray on his tail. Yeah, he has the killer look. Yes, he absolutely does. And I had to put him down because he's heavy. He's a chunk. Yes, he absolutely has the killer look because he is a murdery little beast. That's our less fortunate cat. He's our disappointment. That's sort of my name for him. He's earned that title. That's an earned title, right? But we've had him since he was a kitten. Every family has one, yeah. Every family does have a disappointment, and that right there is our disappointment, for sure. Friend of mine has a cat that ran out of material. Only has half a tail. Yep. Yeah, I've seen those. Yeah, this one, it's like they ran out of paint when they were spray painting him, and they just got to the tail, and they're like, hell with it. Good enough. So his tail is primer gray, with a little bit of overspray. Did the cat, lose the tail, or was he just born that way? Yeah, you see the murder in his eyes? Yeah, exactly. Born that way. Interesting. All right. Let me switch the old camera back, and we will go back to code, all right? But yeah, my wife just brought him in. I guess she managed to catch him somehow. So he's usually not in here, so I usually can't, show him on the pet redeem. Oh, and my other cat's mad that he was even in here. All right. Anyway, so let's see. Expression copy. This is just going to be name. And then instead of doing this stuff, we'll do return object. And then if we get to the end, we'll just return 0. Right? So if we didn't find it, we'll just return null. And then that will allow us to stop repeating code down here. So now we can just say this, and then equals console object get, And we can pass, let's see what we're looking for here. Expression, copy. Right? And then if object, then we do these things. Minus the break, because that's not needed. Okay. Much more gooder. Okay, so for each one of these split counts, this is more or less what we're going to be doing, right? Except we're not going to print the object, right? So we're going to loop through each split, and we're going to use parts sub I, or sub S rather, right? So we'll use the current part of the split string, and if that's an object, we actually need a get property now. Or do we make object get take a parent and do it that way? Maybe that's what we should do instead of having like a separate function for it, right? So maybe we say console object parent. And then if parent, we search the parents. Otherwise, we do this, right? So if we have a parent, then we say u32 property count equals darray length, and that's going to be parent properties. Work faster. Yeah, I know, right? I like to pay attention to chat though, right? So that does slow me down sometimes, but you know, I enjoy it, right? And I hope you guys do too. I hope you guys like the interactive portion of it, right? All right. So, we're basically going to do this same loop here. Property count. And this part of it technically could be recursive. Should we make it recursive though? Because we do have the parent, right? We could change what the parent is. But the weird part is the name. I'm not going to make it recursive for right now. Because the way that we're going to use this is actually going to make this recursive. Ultimately. So I don't think the function itself needs to be recursive. So we'll say, actually it's going to be basically this. Karudo, thank you for the follow. Appreciate that. Welcome to the stream. Instead of state pointer, we're going to say object. And we're going to say properties. And then we obviously have to change the name of this. So we're going to say sub object. Sub object. And then, oh, I guess I could have kept that. Because what's wrong is actually this. Should be parent properties. Okay, so we loop through each property of that. Check its name. If it matches, we return. If it doesn't match, we fall through and return nothing. Okay, that makes sense to me. So for each split count, I'm going to do this a little bit differently. I'm going to start this at 1. And we're going to do the first split without a parent, right? So we'll do console object, and I know I'm redefining what's here, but we'll get to that in a second, equals console object get, and then as a parent, we're going to say 0, and then parts sub s. Or it's going to be parts 0, sorry. Right? So we'll get the parent object first, and then we'll loop through the split count starting at index 1. Now, obviously, if there's only one split, this won't do anything. And I'm actually going to call this parent, right? And then for each one of these, we'll pass the parent, and then parts sub s. We'll check that to see if it returned anything. And then let's see, we should probably say if there is another part to examine. No, actually all we need to do is set parent equal to object. Right? And then once we complete the loop, we should have if parent then we print the parent. And my thought process is like if we have a stray dot or something at the end, which actually we shouldn't because we're omitting empties. But we'll check to make sure we have the parent anyways. And if we do at that point, then we can say console object print indent level 0 and then parent and result equals true. Did we cover everything? I think we did. We just need to change this guy to match the new function, so that doesn't have a parent there. And I think that is good enough. All right, so let's see if this works. I'm dubious. But let's see if it works. All right, so we have this. We'll load up a scene. And then what was my test? I think it was scene.id. I'll be dipped. It worked. Look at that. We have a 1 right there, folks. That's twice tonight that I've gotten something to work on the first try. Granted, all this other error stuff is just because I didn't skip the rest of the logic in the function, but like what we wrote worked. So now I can say scene or scene.id. And it spits it out. So I just have to clean up these errors, right? Because it's trying to do things that it doesn't quite understand what I'm trying to do. So we'll clean that up. So let's see if we do. let's see. So if we have a return from this, a successful return, then we don't want to do the rest of this crap, basically. Which I don't even think we do the split or any of that stuff. Yeah, I guess we do. Okay, so we're gonna need another go-to here, I think. All right, so we need a label here. So let's go command, oops, console command execute cleanup. Which means that we can actually get rid of this poop, because I think cleanup does both. Yep, it does. So we can get rid of this. We can say go to console command execute cleanup. And let's see, we can set, where is that? Has error. Let's move this up here. So we'll set has error equals to true. And then jump to the cleanup. Let's see. I guess we could default that to false, right? We could just do right. If we parse the console, we'll say has error equals false, and then we'll jump to console command execute cleanup. All right, we'll jump past all this stuff because we don't need to do that. This is another perfect example of goto, right? Yes, we could have a huge if-else branch around it, right? But why do that when you can just jump? Yeah, that should actually clean up those issues. Let's just test that real quick. Why go to? Why not call the method directly? What method? So when we do a go to here, right? We're literally doing this, then returning. So it's not a method we're calling. So there are several places where we just want to say we want to skip a whole bunch of stuff and go right to the end of the function, essentially. Yeah. So this is literally performing a jump in code to the end of the function. That way we don't have like this massive section of code that's contained in like some huge else clause or something like that, right? This is just, in my opinion, simpler to do. Just like this one here, right? So like we do a string split and we say, well, if there's no parts to this, right? Then we have an error and we go to the end. Again, clean that up, right? We mark it as having an error, jump to the end of the function, and then we're done. It's not the same as a macro. No, because a macro is a literal drop-in replacement for it's like a find and replace on what you're doing, right? So like k error is a macro, right? Let me find, yeah, here we go. So k error itself is a macro, right? So this literally expands to log output with all this other stuff, right? This is what a macro does. So it replaces our k error message with this here. That's the difference. I like using goto for error conditions cleanup. Absolutely. Yeah, that's where I use them the most common. And actually, what's funny is, especially within the last few months, I've been using them more and more and more because I find it's so good for that condition, right? Whenever you have things that just need to be cleaned up in an error condition, it's so good for that. In a lot of cases like it, right? So any case where you start to load some sort of resource, and maybe that resource loading or parsing or something fails halfway in between, you need to just jump to a cleanup, right? You can do that from multiple parts in code, just bam, right to the end of the function. There's a lot of uses for it. Shouldn't be overused. Like I've said before, it should definitely not be overused, but I think that this is a prime example of a good use for it. It's not the same thing though. So, okay. So, you're saying because you're essentially doing the same thing as copying, pasting that snippet of code where you need to clean up. It's not though, because the difference would be if you are doing, instead of jumping to here, right? If you are doing, let's say you put back there what I had, right? If you're doing this, right, instead of the go-to, right? That is a valid way to do it, right? It's achieving the same thing, but not 100%. What if this function were to later change the cleanup scenario down here to do something different? What if there was some other DRA destroy that you had to add here? Something else, right? Now you have to go through to each place that you've done this and update that as well. So it's really not achieving the same thing. You're literally just jumping to a different, you're literally just, you're performing a jump versus having multiple copies of the same thing. So yeah, you know what I mean? Well, no. So a macro is doing the same thing, right? So a macro is just creating copies of that same thing. So you could macro it, yes, but it's not the same thing that you're doing. Technically, by using a macro, right, you're generating those same, those same calls over and over again in your code. So technically, you're making your code larger for no reason, for no gain. Whereas this is literally just jumping to the same spot in code every time. You're not duplicating your code, right? Don't repeat yourself dry. You're not repeating yourself by using a go-to. There's a big difference. Yes, preprocessor copies and pastes the text. Yeah, so it literally becomes multiple copies of the same thing versus doing it this way where you're just using the same copy of the same thing. So it's kind of the same, but kind of not, right? So you're better off, in my opinion, of using a go-to in this case versus having multiple. And there's places in the code where I had multiple places where we clean up the same code, or the same resources repeatedly. And we don't want to do that. And I'm getting away from doing that. And every time I find one in the engine, I'm fixing it. Macros are hard to refactor as well. They can be. Yep. Go-tos get a bad rep unfairly, I think. Right? They should not be overused, but there are plenty of valid use cases. Yeah. Part of this comes from like go-tos are used in like old languages like BASIC and stuff. You use go-tos all the time. Does the go-to need to end with a return statement? Nope. Doesn't have to. So all a go-to is literally, this is a label, right? This is your label that you create, right? And in C++ or C. All a go-to is literally saying jump to wherever this label is. So the label's got to have a unique name. And all a go-to is saying literally skip past anything that exists between here and that label. Skip past it. Pretend like it doesn't exist. And literally just jump to this address in memory and then execute the stuff after it. Which is one of the reasons that people don't like it, because it's not quite as direct as reading the flow of fors and if else and all that, right? And all this nested stuff, right? A go-to doesn't pay attention to any of that. You can do it in the middle of a loop. You can do it from anywhere, right? If you're in the middle of a loop, it will kick you out of that loop and go to that spot in code, wherever it is. Yeah, it's a jump instruction. It literally turns in. That's why I keep calling it a jump, right? Because it literally turns into an assembly jump instruction. It can become unwieldy if you're not careful. Yep. It's not declarative to more people. Yeah, exactly. Where does the instruction end if it doesn't have a return? I'll handle that as soon as we get past this ad break. I'll answer that. And I see there's some questions about it over on the YouTube side. So I see you guys over there. I will answer that question as soon as we are done with the ad break. Because those are valid questions, right? Sleepy Mushroom, hello. Haman Bello, hello. I will answer your second question there in just a second, Haman. Or Hammond, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. We have about a little over 45 seconds left in ads, and then we will get back to it, right? So I just don't want people to miss something, right? It's a hype train song. Almost done with ads. All right, I think, yeah, ads are dead. Okay, so you were asking, what was the, where was it? It scrolled a little bit. Where does the instruction end if it doesn't have a return? So it's not like a function call, right? So get that out of your head, right? It's literally a jump to this line in code. Forget where you are in terms of context, function stack, or anything like that. Like, it has nothing to do with any of that stuff. I could have this label in a completely different function and it would just jump to that spot in code, right? So anything that you're thinking about in terms of function stack or how deep you are in a for loop or nested for loops or nested ifs, any of that stuff, none of it matters. It is literally a leave where you are, jump to this place in code, and start executing from there down. Leave all your previous context behind, right? Other than anything that is obviously within that same context, right? Or in that same scope. You've never used GoTo before, so you're really doing noob questions here. Yeah, so it's literally just saying jump to this spot in code, regardless of what you're doing. Somebody over on the YouTube side said, why not just have a function? Because you get function overhead. So anytime you call a function, you're adding another function to the stack, right? And a function call incurs overhead. Whereas a goto is a clean jump to a spot in code. So yes, we could encapsulate this into a function and call that repeatedly. And a lot of times that makes sense. But in this case, we don't need to do that, because if we were to create a function, we would also have to pass parts to that function, which would then be used here, right? And it just gets unwieldy quickly as well, right? And so instead of creating a function, we just say, okay, we'll just jump to the end of this function, do the cleanup that we need to do, and then return the value of the opposite of has error, right, to indicate success. I assume goto becomes a small optimization because it's faster than the function call. Exactly. Yes. And also one copy equals smaller executable. Yep, exactly. That's another advantage of it, right? Programmers act like their compiled code isn't actually full of jump statements. Exactly. Yeah, a lot of things that you do are jumps, like for statements, or jump to if equal, right? Like, or jump to if not equal, like if else statements are turned into jumps. Like, yeah, they're used a lot. It's just this one is basically you can jump to it from anywhere when you have a label and you use a goto, right? That's the idea there. Okay, let me see. Wow, I just found an old flash drive that has my first C++ project on it. It takes in a sentence from the command line and outputs the owl bed image from Final Fantasy X. That's nice. I like that. I remember the owl bed language rather. I remember getting all the was it tomes for that? I can't remember what the item was, but you had to collect the items to unlock the individual characters of the language. Yeah, it was pretty cool. It was basically just transposed letters is all it really was, but GoTo just says go to this label and keep running from there. Exactly. Yep. A function call is an abstraction for a jump, isn't it? Yes. But it's also a change in context, right? In scope. Because you also have, function level variables that are at that scope, right? So it's also it's a scope change too. Do variables carry over, or is the stack destroyed? So when you perform a jump, right? Like let's say, let me find a good example. So let's say you were in this function, right? And you were to jump to another function via goto, right? And then in that function you tried to access expression copy. That wouldn't work, right? Because it actually jumps to whatever scope that function is in, right? So all of it depends on how you jump and where you jump to and where you jump from, right? It's all about scope, yeah. So yeah, you wouldn't jump to another function, but that's like a bad example, but like to give you the idea, that's how it works, right? Switch is a jump as well, yes. I use goto solely in a single stack frame, and it would break if I jump out of a function. You don't know assembly, so the compiler is infinitely more qualified to use jumps than me. I mean, not necessarily when you think about it, right? You just have to be mindful of how you're using it. That's all. Let's see. Yeah, so C will actually help you prevent stack corruption as well. You technically can't jump into the scope of another function, right? Like the example I was giving there was, I guess, a bad one, right? Because you can't move from one function to another. But if you're like let's say you have like a variable here, right? I don't know, U8 something, right? And then you jump to down here, like you couldn't, just as you wouldn't be able to access something here, you couldn't access it down there, right? Even though you jumped from here, you still couldn't access it, right? Scope still applies. Go-to labels are local, yeah. I was trying to give an extreme example of I guess that was not really a great example, right? Because it's not really a possible one. But like, I should have said probably like nested ifs or something. Let's see. All right. So, where were we actually? I think I was actually fixing the error output that was happening because it was falling through into some logic that it shouldn't have been. I think I fixed that. I don't know if I built it and tested it though. I don't think so. I lost the context of where I was. You work in telecom, and our drivers have a lot of initialization stuff, and if something happens, we need to clean up an exit. We use goto a lot for that. Exactly. That's the primary use case for it. You can see why people bash on it. I mean, yes and no, right? It's a language feature that is there to be used, but it shouldn't be abused. Yeah, if you look at driver code for any hardware, lots of gotos are used. Yep, 100%. It's very common at the very, very low level. Yeah. So Intrets brings up a good point. Another gotcha is to be mindful of jumping past initializations of variables. So it's useful, but it can cause a lot of confusion with program flow if you don't know what you're doing. Yeah, basically. You just have to really think about it if you're going to do it. So context gets cleaned up when you jump. You mean like if you're in a scope like this and you jump out of that? Is that what you mean? Then yes. Yeah. Yeah, so if you had like local variables in here would get cleaned up, for example, if you jumped out of that scope. So it's the same as you know, stepping out of that scope. All right, let's run this real quick. The function context, yeah, but like if you're in the scope of like an if block or something like that, or in a for loop or something like that, and you jump out of it, that would get cleaned up. Yeah, depends on what scope you're in. Okay, so we have scene. Oh, it's still giving me the identifier is undefined. Did I not fix it? Maybe I didn't fix it. I thought I did. So let's see. Oh, right. We're not booting out of here. That's why. So this was supposed to catch if the identifier is undefined, right? But up here, we've actually found the identifier. Okay. So this is probably a section where I would actually branch this instead of, because otherwise I'm going to have go-tos all over the place. So actually, what I'll do is identifier, oops, not capital, found equals false. And identifier found equals true for that one and that one. And then if not identifier found. Then we'll do this thing instead of doing it all the time. I believe that was it. Let me look at the... Why can't I open the console log? Let's see. The command scene does not exist. Okay, so let me make sure that we're not hitting that logic as well. Oops. The command does not exist. Okay, so if not command found. So if this is failing for some reason, Is that actually failing is the question. I'm going to set some breakpoints just to make sure that we're actually doing this the way we think we're doing it. Let's see. 237. I want to see what we're returning here. Okay, so let's run this. Okay. Scene. That is true. Okay. Oh, you know what? I think when I tested this last time, I don't think I had the scene loaded. So it truly didn't exist, right? There we go. Yeah, I think that's what it was. I didn't actually load the scene, so the scene didn't exist, so it was actually correct. All right, let's see. Since you can only jump with a function, the context will get cleaned up after the function exits, I assume. Yeah, the function-specific context. Very interesting. Never thought about that much about it because school just tells us to avoid it and never really explains. See, and that's the problem with a lot of schools, right? Is they just say, "Oh, don't do this thing," but they don't explain why. And they don't go into it, right? I'm pretty sure if you want to jump between functions, you can use long jump. I think that's what I was thinking of, but those are kind of complicated. Yes. Maybe it's kind of off topic, but just out of curiosity. Do you use some third-party libs, like for mesh or texture loading? Yeah, so there are a couple small things that I use. So in our engine source, we have a vendor folder, and I use STB image and STB true type, right? STB image is for loading different texture formats, and then STB true type is for loading fonts. Neither one of those things I thought were valuable to sort of reinvent the wheel, right? Sean Barrett wrote these two libraries. They're pretty well written. They're pretty reliable, and they're reasonably fast. That being said, these are in here only temporarily. Eventually, these will be split out to a tool set that will do imports and convert them to our own custom binary formats for these things. So we don't have those things yet, so we haven't done that yet, but eventually these will be in external tools only and will not be included in the runtime. The runtime will only deal with its own proprietary formats. That way we don't have to worry about having all of that decoding of formats and stuff like that.
The answer to the great question of life, the universe and everything is 42.
Yes. I love the reference to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy there. That's excellent. Love it. All right, so we have that library, and then we also have a couple small things in, whoops, not standard UI, plugin OpenAL. So this is our audio plugin. So we use OpenAL for that, but then we also use a small header-only library to load MP3s, and then Sean Barrett's STB Vorbis library to load OGG Vorbis files, right? But those are the only things, right? And those are kind of exceptions. And again, these will be offloaded to an external tool set once we have binary formats available for our audio files. So, yes. Yeah, and Diva, thank you for the 1,000 bits, by the way. I really appreciate that. Okay. So, let's see. I think we've made some decent progress tonight. There is much more that we want to do with this, obviously. So I think probably on the next stream, we're going to start handling some of these operators. And we're probably going to wind up redoing a lot of this logic, right? Because I just kind of quickly put this together to see if it was going to work conceptually, which it does. So probably next time we're going to actually split this up and probably start tokenizing the string. And actually, identifying what our different individual bits of the string are, what our tokens are, whether they're identifiers, operators, things like that. And then from there, we'll actually be able to build out, a little bit more complex operations, where we can like do math in the console, or maybe even set object properties, stuff like that. So for the commands, we create a small DSL. DSL. I feel like I know what that should mean, but I can't think of what that's an acronym for. I hate acronyms. What is that? Domain-specific language. Yes. More or less, that's what we're building. Yep. And so it's... and that's one of the reasons I'm saying, like, this is going to be a light scripting language, but it's not going to be fully featured, right? There's languages out there for that we can use. What would it take to make this console an actual scripting language? A lot. Ignoring compiling and stuff. Yeah, so I mean, obviously, and compiling is a whole separate thing, right? But like, we would have to have essentially like our own management of stacks and context and scope management, and you'd want to support things like arrays and strings and all kinds of stuff like that, and it gets hairy really quickly, right? And I don't know that I want to do that. I feel like that would be a huge offshoot and a huge distraction from the core engine, right? So I probably don't want to do that from scratch. JDSL is the best DSL. But in this case, you would not want to compile, right? We just interpret it at runtime, I guess. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is only going to be interpreted. Yeah, it's never going to be compiled. We don't have to run like multiple expressions. In fact, I'm deliberately not going to support, the semicolon or multiple expressions on one line, for that reason, right? Just because it complicates it more. All right. So with this in mind, let me go ahead and so we didn't change that many files tonight, right? Just a few. We already added work in progress, console, object, slash expression parsing. Right. So I'll push this up so that you guys have access to that on the feature console objects branch. But yeah, it's a little bit late for me. I've had a long day. So I think this is where I'm going to call it for tonight, probably. Let's just catch up on some chats before I tie things up here. So Lua is a solid choice. If it fits your use case, it is so well tested. Yeah, so Lua is probably one of the languages I'm going to use. Also C#, I'm thinking as well. You're using C++ as a scripting language in your engine. Yeah, so we technically already have that too versus hot reloading, right? So our game code or our application code is hot reloadable as well. But that doesn't work for everything, right? So it could be useful to have things that you could script and reload without having to sort of recompile, right? Because the drawback of hot reloading is basically your memory model can't change. So, all right. So that's that. Let me look at the YouTube side of chats. Let's see. Okay, it looks like I have some catching up to do here, so I'm going to catch up on the YouTube chat really quickly. What kind of game? Wait, what kind of game could you advise for my programming project? What kind of game? I would say, well, it depends on where your knowledge is, right, and how much time you have to develop a game. Have you made a game before? All of those things, right? But like, if you haven't, if you're looking for like a first time project or something like that, keep it something simple. Maybe make like an arcade style game. Like that's what we're going to do with our engine here, is an arcade style game. So I would do something like that, like a bullet hell game or something like that. Keep it simple, right? Keep it something with, relatively few mechanics that you can really polish and make work well for that kind of thing. Literally just moves the program counter. Yeah, you must be talking about the go-to stuff. Yep. How do I prevent myself from wanting to sleep at 3 p.m.? Believe it or not, as far as the 3 p.m., like if you get the afternoon slump, what I do sometimes is I literally just hit the floor and do some push-ups, and it wakes me right back up. I know that's kind of a weird answer, but yeah, it does work. If you have a standing desk, that helps a lot too. Like this desk here could be adjusted to be a standing desk. Let's see. You suppose they mean something to avoid because it's dangerous otherwise. It can be dangerous, but like, yeah, I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of people poo-pooing on GoTo, right? Sean Barrett is an OG, yes. Sean Barrett's awesome. Hello, I know this may be out of context, but I'm currently in high school. However, I've worked 10 months as a half-time programmer. That's awesome. I've applied for several companies, but I always get rejected because I don't have engineering. I started learning Vulkan because I think if I have the skill, it would be more likely to get contracted. Is this right? If no, what can I do? The company I'm currently in is very small, and I'm not officially contracted. That's why I'm able to work. Okay, so to answer that, the best thing that you can do is have a GitHub with examples of what you can build. And the examples that you build should be reasonably well documented and with documentation on there on how to build it, right? And if you have examples of your work that you can actually show in interviews and say, I can do this, I built this thing, look at this. If you actually have something that you can actually show for that, that's huge, right? And so, you're obviously going to have lots of places that are going to say, well, if you don't have a degree, you're not going to get it, right? But on the other hand, some places will say that, but if you have enough experience doing it, or you can prove that you can do it otherwise, sometimes they'd be willing to overlook that, even if it's on the description, right? So, one thing I tell people a lot of times is, if they meet most but not all of the qualifications of the position, just apply, right? The worst I can tell you is no. But yeah, like in your case, I would say build up a portfolio of projects on GitHub and just keep adding to those and showing off what you can do, and make it very easy for somebody who is trying to evaluate it to pull it down and look at it. I hope that makes sense. All right, let's see. Tapioca. Tapioca. Oh, I like that. Tapioca. That's clever. Yarnito. Yeah, I like that. First time chat, welcome. Let's see. Also, don't eat carbs. Yeah, to avoid that. I would go for a walk outside. Yeah, that's another thing. Let's see. Oh boy, there was a lot of chat over on the Twitch side. Okay. Let's see. Next up is reflection for the editor. It's not quite reflection, right? Like what we're doing here is definitely not reflection. A last off-topic question: do you have a video showing your setup, NeoVim, PowerShell, etc.? I don't have a video, but I do have an article on my website. It's here. I'll link it in chat for you. It's just exclamation point NeoVim for those of you over on the YouTube side. Let's see. Oh, dang it, ads. All right, we gotta wait a minute for ads. We'll be wrapping up after ads, but I just want to finish answering the chats here. Let's see. Man, I need to improve my portfolio, but I have too many motivation issues and self-doubt. So the thing I'll say about that is try not to doubt yourself too much. Just try to actually do, right? Don't beat yourself up about what you don't know. Everybody doesn't know stuff, right? There's plenty of stuff I don't know too, right? Don't beat yourself up because it's an unfair fight. You know your weak points, you're just going to go for those and beat yourself up, right? Don't do that. The best thing I can say about that is just put that out of your mind and sit down and just write stuff, right? Just make stuff. Be stubborn about it, right? Push past that and just try to make stuff. We're almost done with ads. Just have less than 10 seconds left here. All right, back. Ads are dead. Okay, so let's see. You're going for a tower defense as a first project. That's a good first project, actually. Tower defense games are neat. Following in Cake's footsteps, are we? Yeah, nice. I love Cakes. He's awesome. Okay. If I get a 3 p.m. slump, I usually try to take a nap. I wish that was an option for me, honestly. Oh yeah, Cake77, definitely follow him. He's awesome. In fact, I'll toss a shout out. Cakes is hilarious. Why is it not? There it goes. Let's see. Yeah. So Diva actually brings up a good point. If you actually have a place where you're working even unofficially, right? Keep working there to get that experience, right? Keep on with that place while you're building your portfolio in your spare time. Keep working at that place to gather experience, right? Because you can put that on your resume. Let's see. He streams around 3 a.m. Pacific time. Yeah, that's why I can't always catch him online, right? Discipline. Yeah, that's a thing for sure. All right, cool. So I think that is going to do it for the stream tonight. Let me see who I can raid. See who's on. Let me just pop open Twitch real quick. All right. Who do I want to raid? I just got to pick somebody real quick. I'm trying to look for somebody I haven't raided before, actually. I love how it always shows me a list of myself as well. That's always hilarious. Shadowcat, thank you for the follow. Appreciate that. All right. Yeah, I think I'm gonna raid somebody that I've raided before, but that's fine. Actually, you know what? I know who I'm gonna raid. Because I try to raid them at least once a week, and I don't think I've raided it this week. So I'm gonna raid Ferret Software. It's a ferret rescue that is run by Pirate Software, and all of the ad revenue for this channel goes into taking care of the 20 some odd ferrets he has at this point. And these ferrets are basically taken from near-death scenarios, and they are medically rehabilitated and given a permanent home there, right? They're not rehomed or anything like that. And like I said, the ad revenue from this pays for all of the expenses, including the medical bills, which sometimes include surgeries and super expensive stuff, right? So I think it's a really great cause. I like to support it. And so that's who I'm going to raid tonight. So thank you guys for being here. If you haven't already, follow me on the different places and things. I appreciate it. And I will see you guys on the next stream. Peace.